Chapter 1689. Her body was forced to hang in the air as if an iron hand was gripping her neck tightly. A terrifying pressure pressed down on his body, making it difficult for him to even breathe. Chu Yue's face flushed red. Luo Yan's eyes were high and mighty. "Are you willing to apologize now?" Nanny Yi stood beside him and couldn't help but smile smugly when she saw this scene. She looked at Chu Luiyue with a trace of undisguised cold mockery. Shang Wanyu was indeed capable. If it was a one-on-one fight, Nanny Yi was sure that she was definitely not her match. But so what? Even if she couldn't defeat her, she could ask Uncle Luo Yan for help. In the end, Shang Wanyu would still be trampled under her feet. The sound of the zither seemed to be getting closer and clearer to Chu Yue's ears. Her lips curled into a smile, but there was coldness in the depths of her black, jade-like eyes. You're dreaming. You're courting death." Luo Yan held the divine, binding vine tightly and was about to move when he suddenly felt a cold wind coming from the side. He frowned and quickly turned to look. Unknowingly, a small figure had already appeared around him. The distance between them was less than 3 steps. His heart was suddenly filled with shock. When did this little girl come here? How come he didn't sense any energy or spatial fluctuation? Dumpling's small face was full of anger, and her eyes were red. The lotus leaf dress on her body fluttered even though there was no wind. At a glance, it was like a raging flame that was going to devour everything. "How dare you bully you? You're courting death." Tuan Zi roared, and at the same time he punched out. Her small hand was chubby and tender. When it was clenched into a fist, it looked like a soft cotton candy. However, Luo Yan's expression suddenly changed. The speed of Dumpling's punch was simply too fast. Moreover, when her fist struck, the surrounding void actually couldn't withstand it and started to collapse one after another. It was obvious that this fist contained an astonishing amount of power. Luo Yan's eyes darkened as he punched out at the same time. Bang! The two fists collided, producing a muffled sound. Luo Yan felt as if his fist had landed on a steel plate. After a brief moment of silence, an indescribable numbing pain spread through his body. Luo Yan's eyelids twitched violently. If it wasn't for the fact that his divine body had already reached large success, his bones would have been shattered. On the other hand, the little girl's expression did not change. It was as if she could not feel any pain at all. What a hard fist! What a powerful physical body! Countless speculations flashed through Luo Yan's mind. Such a terrifying melee ability was definitely not something an ordinary human could possess. What's more, this little girl clearly didn't have the slightest ripple of origin power on her body. Could be a magical beast. However, the only ones that could transform into human form were the 2 ancient divine beasts. I've never heard of them being able to transform into such an appearance. Before he could figure it out, Dumpling's second punch had already arrived. "I can't fight her head-on anymore." Luo Yan's brows furrowed. With a tap of his toes, he swiftly retreated. "Pah!" Seeing that he was about to retreat, Dumpling stomped on the divine, binding vine ruthlessly. Just as the transparent rope was about to wrap around her, Dumpling narrowed her eyes, and her body suddenly burned with reddish-gold flames. At the same time, she bent down, grabbed the divine, binding vine in her hand, and tugged hard. The divine binding vine instantly tightened its grip. Luo Yan's other hand was still tightly holding onto the divine binding vine. This time, it directly pulled him back, causing him to be unable to continue retreating. However, at this moment, he could no longer be bothered to be shocked by Dumpling's strength. This was because he had finally confirmed Dumpling's identity. Reddish gold heavenly phoenix? This flame, this aura, it's definitely a reddish gold heavenly phoenix. He quickly circulated the energy around him and was in a stalemate with Dumpling. At the same time, his gaze kept wandering between Dumpling and Chu Luiyue. An absurd guess appeared in his mind. Could it be this reddish gold heavenly phoenix is Shang Wanyu's contracted divine beast? Luo Yan was shocked and really did not dare to believe it. However, apart from this, there seemed to be no other better answer. If not for the contract, Why would this reddish-gold heavenly phoenix be so angry because of Shangguan Yu's injury? It would not even care about anything else and rush up to attack. But how arrogant was the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? They usually did not even bother to interact with humans, let alone have a contract with them. Such a reddish-gold heavenly phoenix had wandered outside and become a contracted divine beast of the human race. However, the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan did not have any reaction at all. Luo Yin found it unbelievable. However, now was not the time to dwell on this. After hesitating for a moment, he simply let go of the divine binding vine. Dumpling was caught off guard and fell back uncontrollably due to inertia. On Chu Yue's side, she had just managed to catch her breath and was about to help Dumpling up when another force suddenly attacked her. Not good. Her heart skipped a beat, and she quickly dodged. At this moment, Luo Yin seized the opportunity and pounced on her again. This time, his speed was even faster. Chu Luiyue instinctively sensed danger and was forced to retreat. In the blink of an eye, the two of them had retreated quite a distance away from Dumpling. Chu Luiyue frowned. Luo Yin clearly wanted to avoid Dumpling from attacking her. Although Dumpling's combat strength was not bad, Luo Yin was a god-level expert after all. It might not be a problem to temporarily block him, but it was impossible for her to truly defeat Luo Yin. She clenched the red cloud sword in her hand tightly, but because Luo Yin's suppression was too strong, she was unable to attack. Soon, Luo Yin approached her again. Chu Yue's speed was not slow, and she was definitely considered one of the best among cultivators of the same level. However, compared to Luo Yin, she was still too weak. Luo Yin caught up to her without much effort at all. This time, his attack was very direct, and his palm was about to hit Chu Luiyue. An indescribable sense of suppression came crashing down. Chu Luiyue's breathing stagnated. Originally, she wanted to try to receive this attack, but the other party's suppression was too strong, and she could not circulate the energy in her body. The difference in strength between the two of them was too big, so she did not even have the chance to attack. Luo Yan's expression was indifferent, and he looked at her as if he was looking at an ant that was struggling futilely. Shangguan Yu, you should know that there are some people that you can't afford to offend. As his voice fell, the tyrannical wind from his palm had already enveloped Chu Luiyue. At this moment, her body seemed to be nailed to the ground, and she could not move at all. She could only watch helplessly as that shocking power came closer and closer to her. A thick smell of blood spread out between her lips and teeth. The sound of the zither beside Chu Luiyue's ears suddenly became clear at this moment. Her temples were throbbing, as if something was about to break out from the bottom of her heart. However, at this moment, a deep and vigorous voice exploded in the sky like a sudden clap of thunder. Who dares to hurt my disciple? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1690. Master. Chu Luiyue was overjoyed and immediately looked up. The void vibrated and rippled. A figure in a long white robe stepped out from within. It was the dean of Lingxiao College, her master, Nan Suhui. He waved his sleeve, and a powerful force flew out. It went straight for Luo Yin. Danger! Luo Yin was shocked and had no choice but to stop and retreat. However, the force of Nan Suhui's strike was so strong that it caused him to stagger backward. Almost at the same time, Elder Wu Peng was no match for Rong Xiu and suffered a heavy blow. He flew backward and landed heavily on the ground. Elder Bai Tong, who had been fighting with Chu Ning, was also shocked when he noticed the commotion and immediately retreated. Uncle Luo Yin, Elder Wu Peng. Nanny could no longer maintain the smile on her face when she saw the people on her side being repelled. She rushed over in a hurry. Nan Yuxing opened his mouth, but did not say anything. However, a strong sense of uneasiness suddenly surged in his heart. Nan Suhui's figure flashed and blocked in front of Chu Luiyue. Rongxiu stepped forward and supported Chu Luiyue. Nan Suhui first turned around and glanced at her nervously. Are you okay? Chu Luiyue shook her head. Master, don't worry. I'm fine. It was just a flesh wound. It was not a big deal. Luo Yin did not have time to be ruthless. Her master had arrived. Rongxiu's face was cold and solemn. He reached out to touch Chu Liuyue's neck. The sudden pain made Chu Liyue shrink her neck. Sensing Rongxiu's aura turning colder, Chu Liyue quickly said, "It's just a small wound. It's not a big deal." When the two of them were fighting just now, there were a few red marks on her neck. She was so anxious that she forgot about it. Rongxiu didn't say anything. He stared at the wound with a deep look in his eyes. Chu Ning and Dumpling quickly followed. Although Chu Liyue came out unscathed, they all saw the situation clearly. Luo Yin was indeed ruthless. If Nan Su Huai hadn't arrived in time, no one knew what would have happened to Chu Liyue. Nan Su Huai's face turned cold. He turned to Luo Yin and sneered. "Luo Yin, I haven't seen you for many years. You've really become more and more capable. You actually dare to bully this old man's disciple." His voice was deep like thunder, and every single word carried a shocking pressure that smashed heavily into the ears of Luo Yin and the others. Nan Yuxing and Nan Yi, whose cultivation bases were slightly weaker, trembled at the same time and spat out blood. Elder Baitong was already seriously injured, so he was unable to dodge in time. Suddenly bearing the terrifying pressure, his face immediately turned pale. There was no need to mention Elder Wu Peng. He had already been beaten black and blue by Rongxiu. At this moment, he didn't even have the strength to get up. Although Luo Yin was slightly better than them, his face turned extremely ugly when he saw the situation on his side. Nan Su Huai actually came. Who in the Divine Ruins world didn't know that Nan Su Huai was a rare all-rounder who was extremely outstanding in all aspects of cultivation? He had already broken through to the Supreme God Realm several decades ago. Although Nan Su Huai had kept a low profile in recent years and rarely appeared in public in the Divine Ruins world, Luo Yin didn't dare to underestimate him. Who knew what realm Nan Su Huai's strength had reached? Judging from the blow just now, Nan Su Huai was definitely not below his level. This was going to be difficult. Although the number of people on both sides was about the same, there was almost no one on their side who could continue fighting. On the other hand, the people on the other side still had the strength to fight. If they really chose to fight head-on, they would definitely be the ones at a disadvantage. Luo Yin took a deep breath, suppressed the anger in his heart, and cupped his hands at Nan Su Huai. "So it's Dean Nan. I think Dean Nan has misunderstood what happened just now. Actually, I don't have any other intentions. It's just that there was some conflict between these juniors, and I wanted them to talk things out." Nan Su Huai's seniority was higher than his, and he had broken through to the Supreme God Realm earlier than him. Therefore, in front of Nan Su Huai, he couldn't even say the two words, "this lord." Unfortunately, Nan Su Huai snorted disdainfully at his words. "Luo Yin, do you really think this old man's eyesight is bad because of old age? Just now, how did you bully you? This old man clearly saw it. Misunderstanding. Don't you think it's funny when you hear this?" Nan Su Huai's words were laced with sarcasm. Obviously, he didn't intend to leave Luo Yin any face. Luo Yan's face turned even darker. "Dean Nan, I explained it to you properly, but you didn't appreciate it. Isn't this a little too much? Whether it's this old man speaking nonsense or you using your power to bully others, isn't it still a different story?" Nan Su Huai sneered. "No matter what, you are still a dignified Supreme God expert. How could you be so ruthless to a junior? If news of this spreads, Luo Yin, I wonder if you still want to keep your face?" Luo Yan's face flushed red and white, but he couldn't think of any rebuttal. He didn't think so much and only wanted to help Nan vent her anger. Who knew that Shangguan Yu's attitude would be so unyielding and stubborn that he had no choice but to make a move? In the end, Nan Su Huai happened to see it. Nan Su Huai had been a powerful figure in the Divine Ruins world for many years and was also the dean of Lingxiao College. He had seen countless geniuses, but he had only accepted one disciple. One could imagine how picky he was. Moreover, he was famous for being protective of his disciples. Even they, who didn't have much contact with Lingxiao College, had heard of it. Seeing this scene, Nan Suhui obviously wouldn't let it go. Nan, since you're here, it's good that you're here. Let's settle our previous debts together. Luo Yin raised his hand and pointed at Nan Yi and the others. Your precious disciple has injured our people to such an extent, and she hasn't even said a word of apology until now. What do you think of this, Dean Nan? Nan Suhuai's gaze swept across the few of them before he squinted and turned to look at Chu Luiwei. Did you do this? Chu Luiwei said calmly. Half of it. Nan Suhui was stunned. What do you mean half of it? Chu Luiwei raised her chin a little and seemed to smile as she slowly said, That's right. Half of it is because they provoked us, and the other half is because they were unlucky enough to provoke another god. Luo Yin was the first to change his expression. He immediately looked at Nan Yi. You met a venerable god before? Why didn't you say this? They knew how difficult it was to deal with a goddess. Although Elder Wu Peng and Elder Baitong were of high status, one was a weapon refiner and the other was a celestial physician. If they really fought, they might not be a match for a goddess. Nan Yi hesitated and seemed to be in a dilemma. Do you know where a goddess came from? No matter what, this debt couldn't be settled just like that. Chu Luiwei suddenly laughed. I've already killed her goddess. You won't be able to find her even if you look for her. Forget it. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1691. As soon as he finished speaking, there was dead silence. Chu Yue's expression didn't change as she smiled and said, Oh, right. Oh, that's right. Speaking of which, I did you guys a favor. Not only did you not thank me, but you guys kept finding trouble with me. How interesting. The atmosphere became even stranger. For a moment, Luo Yin didn't know what kind of expression to show. His expression was awkward and stiff. He quickly glanced at Nan Yi and the others, and his heart sank slightly. He knew Nan Yi and the others too well. Since Shangwan Yu had said so, although their expressions were ugly, they didn't look shocked. This proved that this matter was most likely true. Nan Yi finally couldn't help but refute. Who knows if you were the one who killed that person? If you guys used any tricks, it's my ability to use tricks, isn't it? Chu Luiwei interrupted her with a smile. The process wasn't important. The result was the most important. Nan Yi choked. Luo Yin took a deep breath. A high god kill a high god. How is that possible? He had never heard of such a thing in the entire Divine Ruins world. Nan Suhui was also shocked and hurriedly asked, is what you said true? Chu Luiwei blinked. Master, when have I ever lied to you? Rong Xiao, father, and Dumpling can all testify for me. Nan Suhui cursed in his heart. How many times have you lied to me? But he obviously couldn't say that now. Rong Xiao nodded. Is telling the truth. The reason why we came here this time was because that person wanted to use Lord Chu Ning's life to threaten Yuer. He wanted to kill Yuer, but he was killed instead. Even Nan Suhui couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. Listen to that. Is this what a human should say? A high god killed a high god. Only you guys can say such things so calmly. However, despite his shock, Nan Suhui quickly accepted this matter. Ever since he had accepted Yuer as his disciple, he knew that as long as he was with her, there was nothing impossible in this world. This girl had even repaired the Tianxuo formation. What was so strange about her killing a god? At this moment, Nan Suhui didn't find it strange at all. He only had one thought left in his mind. Sometimes, when a disciple is too hard-working, it really tests the heart of a master. He was silent for a while, then gave Chu Luiwei a thumbs up and said seriously, well done. You are indeed worthy of being my disciple. When you get back, you have to tell Master what exactly is going on. Chu Luiwei agreed. Sure. Seeing the happy appearance of the master and disciple, Luo Yin only felt as if there was a string in his brain that suddenly tightened. What time was it now that they were actually discussing these things directly? These people were really going too far? Each and every one of them did not put them in their eyes at all. Everything is just your side of the story. How can we believe it? He finally couldn't hold it in anymore and reprimanded coldly. This voice finally reminded Nan Su-Huai of their existence. He chuckled. Then what you said just now was also just your side of the story, wasn't it? Why should we believe you? This sentence finally caused the two sides to fall into a stalemate again. Neni bit her lip tightly. She had never thought that things would develop to this point. Wasn't it just dealing with Shang Guanyu? Why was it so difficult? Even now, she hadn't even taken revenge and had even implicated Uncle Luo Yin. She wasn't stupid. The sudden appearance of this old man made Uncle Luo Yin very wary. Otherwise, he wouldn't have suppressed his anger and spoken so politely just now. Unfortunately, the two sides still didn't seem to be able to come to an agreement. Neni stole a quick glance at Luo Yin. Based on her past experience, this matter definitely wouldn't go according to what she had thought before, but she wasn't willing to accept it. Nani reached out and grabbed Luo Yin's sleeve, speaking in an extremely low voice. Uncle Luo Yin, that thing is on her. Luo Yin was shocked and stared at her. Really? Nani pursed her lips and nodded. How would I dare to joke about such a thing? Previously, Elder Wu Peng used the Great Star Disc to investigate, and the result was the same. Otherwise, we wouldn't have left and come back. Luo Yan's expression changed quickly, and he finally looked at Chu Luiwei. Originally, he wanted to make peace with the other party. After all, Nan Su-Huai wasn't someone to be trifled with. But if it was really as Nanny said, he was afraid that this matter would have to be reconsidered. Although Nanny's voice was very low, no one present was an ordinary person, and everyone heard it clearly. Chu Yoyue's eyes were tinged with fatigue and impatience. Even if they weren't annoyed, she was. I'll say it for the last time. I don't know what you're looking for, and that thing isn't on me. Now, either you apologize or continue to fight. You can choose one. With Nan Su-Huai around, they had a high chance of winning. Of course, they weren't afraid of fighting with them. Nan Su-Huai frowned. What are they talking about? Chu Luiwei shook her head. If she knew, she wouldn't have to play riddles with them here. After a moment, Luo Yin took a step forward. I have a suggestion. Shang Guanyu, if you're willing to accept my investigation and confirm that the thing is indeed not on you, we can immediately apologize to you and prepare a generous gift to express our apology. If you're unwilling, then, I'm afraid today's matter will be delayed for a long time. These words were half a negotiation and half a threat. Chu Luiwei frowned and was a little unhappy. Nan Su-Huai's face turned cold. Luo Yin, I agree, Chu Luiwei suddenly said. She thought about this suggestion carefully and felt that she wouldn't be at a disadvantage. Although they had a high chance of winning with their master around, their background wasn't simple. If they really shed all pretense of cordiality, it wouldn't be easy to clean up the mess in the end. It would be best if this matter could be resolved easily. She took a step forward. Please, digression, it's Christmas Eve. Let's all be safe and happy. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from love. Chapter 1692. Luo Yin looked at her deeply, raised his hand, and drew a small arc in front of him. A stream of light flashed, and a palm-sized compass appeared out of thin air. At the same time, a totem was faintly discernible between his brows. Chu Luiwei raised her eyebrows. By the way, don't forget about the conditions that you mentioned earlier. Luo Yin said indifferently. Of course. As he spoke, he gently brushed his hands over the compass. A moment later, the needle on the compass suddenly shook violently. Seeing this, Chu Luiwei frowned slightly, and a trace of inexplicable uneasiness appeared in her heart. This thing's reaction seemed to be really abnormal. Finally, the needle stopped. It pointed straight at Chu Luiwei. Chu Luiwei's heart sank. Luo Yin suddenly raised his head, and his gaze was as sharp as a knife. Shang Guanyu, what else do you have to say? The evidence was conclusive. It couldn't be more obvious. That thing was indeed on her. Chu Yueyue's hands quickly clenched in her sleeves. In an instant, countless thoughts flashed through her mind. How could this be? What exactly were they looking for? Why were they so sure that it was on her? Chu Luiwei didn't think that Luo Yin had done something to deliberately make the needle point at her. At this time, Luo Yin should want to solve this matter more smoothly than them. After all, they didn't have any advantage. If they continued to be entangled, it would only be more disadvantageous for them. He didn't have to do this at all. That meant she really had the thing they were looking for. Dinan, I'm sorry. Today, Shangwan, you must hand over the thing. Luo Yin shouted sternly, and then his figure disappeared from the spot. A strong gust of wind suddenly swept over. Chu Luiwei was alarmed. Luo Yin, how dare you? Seeing this, Nan Su Huai immediately attacked. Rong Xiu grabbed Chu Luiwei's waist and quickly retreated with her. However, at this moment, Chu Luiwei suddenly felt a chill from behind. She quickly turned around and saw a familiar face. It was Luo Yin. This is his divine body. Rong Xiu reacted quickly and attacked without hesitation. However, Luo Yin was a god, and he had summoned his divine body. He was determined to take down Chu Luiwei. He quickly dodged Rong Xiu's attack. With a wave of his sleeve, several silver needles with a cold luster flew out. Those silver needles were about an inch long and sharp. In the blink of an eye, they had surrounded Chu Luiwei. Chu Luiwei raised his sword to block. Clang! Clang! Sharp sounds of collisions rang out one after another. Although those silver needles were small, they contained extremely strong power. After such a fierce attack, Chu Luiwei's sword-wielding hands were numb. Even the webbing between his thumb and forefinger had split open and was bleeding. Rong Xiu was about to come over when he was blocked by Luo Yan's divine body. Just as Chu Luiwei thought that everything was over, the silver needles that she had blocked earlier suddenly changed directions and attacked her again. Moreover, their speed and strength seemed to be even stronger than before. Shocked, Chu Luiwei faced them again. The continuous attacks forced her to continuously dodge and retreat. Suddenly, she felt a chill on her back. She had nowhere to retreat and crashed into a black wall. The wall was rough, and when she was pressed tightly against it, she felt a stinging pain. With a thought, Chu Luiwei already had a black shield in her hand. All the silver needles were blocked outside. They couldn't even leave a mark on it. Luo Yan's expression changed. That black shield, taking advantage of his distraction, Rong Xiu quickly attacked. A cluster of golden flames transformed into a whip and tightly bound his divine body. Luo Yan didn't think much of it and sneered. Even with the power of a god, you dare. Suddenly, his voice came to an abrupt stop, because he realized that his divine body couldn't break free from Rong Xiu's fire whip. The more he struggled, the more intense the burning pain on his body was. Luo Yan looked at Rong Xiu in shock and anger. Looking into those bottomless eyes, he suddenly felt a chill in his heart. And because he was stunned for a moment, he didn't see the thick black color that was silently surging in the golden flames that tightly bound him. However, just as the situation gradually became clear, Chu Luiwei glanced out of the corner of her eye, and her heart instantly tightened. Nan Yuxing was suddenly running toward Chu Ning. His face was gloomy, and he was exuding a terrifying, murderous intent. At the same time, a saber appeared in his hand. The saber was wide and thick, and the tip of the saber was suffused with a strange blue light. It was poisonous. Father, be careful. Chu Luiwei immediately planned to move and run in that direction. However, a figure was rapidly closing in on him again. It was none other than Nan Yi. At this moment, her expression was ferocious, and her eyes were filled with murderous intent. But the most shocking thing was that the pressure on her body was suddenly much stronger than before. This wasn't her aura. Almost instantly, Chu Luiwei understood what was going on. This force definitely didn't belong to Nan Yi. In a flash, Nan Yi clenched the triangular pyramid in her hand and stabbed it fiercely toward Chu Luiwei. Chu Luiwei's body tensed up in an instant. The power of a god. Go to hell. Nan Yi gritted her teeth and said in a low voice. Every word seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps of her teeth, carrying deep hatred and resentment. Chu Luiwei didn't hesitate and directly raised the black shield. It blocked in front of him. Whoosh! A sharp, ear-piercing sound rang out, almost making one's scalp tingle. The tyrannical power surged over, and Chu Yue's body crashed heavily against the wall behind him once again. It seemed like she had hit something sharp, and a wound appeared on her shoulder and back. Chu Yue clenched his teeth tightly as the blood in his body surged. Nan still seemed a little dissatisfied. This triangular pyramid was specially given to her by her father for self-defense before she left home. Previously, she couldn't bear to take it out and use it. It was only when she saw that Chu Yue was alone that she had an idea and decided to take advantage of this opportunity to attack her. However, she had originally thought that this attack would be able to take Shanghai Yu's life directly. Nan gritted her teeth and waved the triangular pyramid again indignantly. Even if she couldn't pierce through this strange shield, the power left behind by her father was enough to make Shanghai Yu suffer. However, just as the triangular pyramid was about to land on the black shield again, the sound of a zither suddenly came from afar. The sound of the zither seemed to come from a very far place, but when it landed in her ears, it was extremely clear. The most shocking thing was that the sound of the zither carried an undisguised, strong, murderous intent. It caused Nan mind to be in a mess and her entire body to turn numb. Although it was just a sound, she seemed to have smelled a strong smell of blood. She subconsciously stopped what she was doing and looked up. That sound was coming from here. She saw that the black wall behind Chu Yue suddenly glowed. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1693. What's going on? For some reason, an indescribable sense of fear suddenly surged from the bottom of Nanny's heart as she looked at the flowing light. Even though she didn't know what it was, she still keenly felt the terrifying danger. She didn't even think about it and immediately retreated. At the same time, Chu Yue also heard the sound of the zither. She looked up and happened to see Nan staring at the wall behind her with a horrified expression. Her eyes were filled with fear. It was as if she had seen something extremely terrifying. When Nan started to retreat, Chu Yue finally turned around to take a look. However, what she saw stunned her for a moment, because she suddenly realized that these streams of light were constantly gathering, as if they were forming some kind of totem, and for some reason, she felt that it was a little familiar. She frowned and took a few steps back. She wanted to take a closer look at the giant totem and see what it looked like. However, just as she raised her foot, a tyrannical suction force suddenly came from the wall. Her body immediately rushed forward uncontrollably. In the next moment, her figure completely disappeared behind the wall. Before everyone could react, they saw a white figure quickly hiding behind the wall. It was Rongxiao. In addition, there was also a small figure who was only half a step behind Rongxiao. She also raised her foot and rushed over. That was Dumpling. Everything happened in the blink of an eye, under the watchful eyes of the crowd. The three figures quickly disappeared just like that. This scene shocked everyone present. Wasn't that just a wall? Why did it suddenly devour the three of them? It didn't even leave them any time to react. Nan Suhui frowned and looked over. Only then did he see that several streams of light had appeared on the black wall. They intertwined with each other and seemed to be outlining a certain pattern. The power on it was so shocking that even the void around the wall was shaking. Nan Suhui stopped fighting and wanted to rush in. Halfway through, he suddenly heard a figure. President Nan. Nan Suhui turned around. You're Yu's father, Chuning? Chuning immediately nodded with a worried expression. Is Dean going in as well? I wonder if Chuning can go with you? He was truly worried about you. Although Rongxiao and Dumpling had already followed them in, this incident was too strange, and he was still worried. If they could move together, it should be able to reduce a lot of unnecessary trouble. Nan Suhui nodded without hesitation. Then let's go together. After saying that, the two of them really moved forward and entered the black wall. The originally chaotic and noisy scene quickly quieted down. Luo Yin recalled his divine body and looked at the black wall with a frown. In fact, when he arrived here, he noticed this wall at first glance, but because all his attention was on Nan and Shang Wanyu, he didn't pay much attention to it. However, From the looks of it, there was indeed something fishy about this wall. What happened just now? Nan Yuxing couldn't help but murmur in shock. His eyes were filled with astonishment. Everything was fine just a moment ago. How did everyone suddenly disappear? Luo Yin took a step forward and seemed to be planning to go in as well. Nanny hurriedly grabbed his sleeve. Uncle Luo Yin, you can't go in. Luo Yin saw her panicked expression and only thought that she was frightened by the sudden scene, so he patted her shoulder and said, "The thing is still with Shang Guanyu. Don't worry, I'll go get it and come back immediately." Nanny still refused to let go and shook her head nervously. "No, you can't go in. You really can't go in. Uncle Luo Yin, it's too dangerous inside." At this moment, Luo Yin realized that her eyes were filled with fear and her body was trembling slightly. She seemed to be really scared. Could it be that she saw something just now? Luo Yin frowned. "What's wrong? Is there a problem?" Nanny shook her head. I don't know either, but I just feel that something is wrong inside. Uncle Luo Yin, why don't we wait outside? Anyway, they will come out sooner or later, won't they? It's the same to wait for them to come out. Luo Yin frowned even more. No one could guarantee when Shang Guanyu and the others would come out after going in. Moreover, what if they didn't come out? At that time, it wouldn't be so easy to find them and take back the item. But Nanny was rarely so scared, and it really made him feel uneasy. He hesitated for a moment, but in the end, his heart ached for Nanny. "Okay, then let's not go in. We'll just wait here." Before he could finish his sentence, another terrifying suction force swept over from the wall. The figures of the few people were quickly swallowed up. Not long after, all the figures in the area had completely disappeared. The wilderness once again regained its usual silence. Darkness. Endless darkness. Chu Luiyue only felt her body falling continuously. She was surrounded by a thick black color that couldn't be dissolved. It was quiet, and only the sound of the wind whistling past her ears. Fortunately, this situation didn't last for long. She felt her body fall onto a piece of land. The ground was soft, and the fall wasn't heavy. Chu Luiyue stood up and was about to take out a pearl to illuminate the place when a faint light suddenly leaked from above her head. She looked up. There seemed to be a blue-black sky above her head, like the sky in the middle of the night. However, right in the middle, there was an opening that had been cut open by something. Light seeped through and sprinkled on Chu Luiyue's body. It was also this light that allowed Chu Luiyue to see the surrounding scenery clearly. There was no scenery. All she saw was a piece of black land. Other than that, there was nothing else. She could only see the appearance of the area within 100 steps. Everything further away was still hidden in the darkness, and it was difficult to approach and grasp. "Rong Xiao," Chu Luiyue called out softly. Before entering, she vaguely saw that Rong Xiao seemed to be following her closely. But now, it seemed that he wasn't with her. Chu Luiyue called out twice more, but there was still no response. This was expected. Chu Luiyue pursed her lips and didn't care too much. But where was Dumpling? 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 Chu Luiyue called out Dumpling a few more times, but there was no response. The surroundings were quiet. Chu Luiyue's hands slowly clenched. Dumpling was her contracted divine beast, and they were telepathic. Even if they were separated by a distance, they could still sense each other. But now, she couldn't even detect Dumpling's breath. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1694. Was it because they were so far apart that they couldn't sense each other, or was there something that forcibly cut off the connection between them? Chu Luiyue didn't know. She put away the black shield, but still held the Scarlet Heaven sword tightly in her hand. After resting for a while and adjusting the breath in her body, Chu Luiyue lifted her feet and walked forward. She randomly chose a direction. After all, she couldn't tell any direction in this place. Instead of waiting in place and relying on a glimmer of hope to wait for Rong Xiao and the others to come, she might as well go find them herself. Even if she couldn't find them in a short time, it would be good to know more about this place. Thus, Chu Luiyue stepped on the road alone. Along the way, the faint smell of blood lingered at the tip of her nose. If Chu Luiwei wasn't so sensitive to this smell, she might not have noticed it. Unfortunately, she had never been able to identify where this smell came from. It was as if the air here had been filled with this smell. The surroundings were quiet. Chu Luiwei could only hear her own footsteps and her heartbeat. At a certain moment, she suddenly stopped and looked ahead. At this moment, the crack on the top of his head was much wider than before. More light shone in, allowing Chu Luiwei to see further. In front of her was still a vast expanse. However, Chu Luiwei's heart suddenly beat faster, because the sound of the zither that had been lingering in her ears suddenly disappeared at this moment. She unconsciously clenched the Scarlet Heaven sword, and the blood in her body seemed to flow faster. She opened her mouth, only to find that her throat was dry and tight. Tap, tap, tap. An unfamiliar sound of footsteps suddenly came from the darkness. The footsteps were slow and calm, as if taking a stroll. However, every step seemed to be stepping on Chu Luiwei's heart. She seemed to have a premonition, and her whole body tensed up. Finally, a figure appeared in her line of sight. At the same time, a casual voice with a smile fell into her ears. "You're finally here." On the other side, after Rong Xiu followed Chu Luiwei in, the surroundings also fell into darkness. But soon, a white light flashed past his eyes. His heart trembled as he looked over. That ray of white light was actually spreading rapidly not far from him. Then, the light quickly condensed into a huge mirror. Everything around them was pitch black, but the appearance of the mirror instantly tore the darkness apart. A faint light was emitted from the mirror. The mirror was huge and wide. At a glance, one could not see the edges of it. It was as if it was completely embedded in the darkness and had become one with the surrounding darkness. It stood quietly in front of Rong Xiu. The surroundings were silent, and even the sound of the wind seemed to have stopped. Rong Xiu looked up slightly. A figure appeared in the mirror. The lines of his cheeks were smooth, and his appearance was pure and enchanting. He had sword-like eyebrows, a high-nosed bridge, and thin crimson lips. There wasn't a single spot that wasn't meticulously carved by the heavens. Compared to him, it seemed that everything in the world was dim in color. The figure reflected in the mirror was Rong Xiu. However, it was not exactly the same as Rong Xiu at this moment. Rong Xiu was dressed in white, and his eyes were clear and gentle. He was elegant and charming. However, the person in the mirror was dressed in a black robe. His eyes were deep and dense, and he was majestic and full of vigor. They clearly had the same appearance and figure, but they looked like two completely different people. Rong Xiu narrowed his eyes slightly, but there was no shock on his face. It seemed that he had expected this. He raised his hand, and a golden flame gushed out from his palm, jumping happily. Almost at the same time, the person in the mirror also raised his hand, and a cluster of flame appeared at his fingertips. However, the flame was thick and black. Rong Xiu knitted his brows slightly, but they quickly relaxed as his thin lips curved up slightly. So fast, the person in the mirror looked at him. "Since you're here, you should have expected this scene. Besides, you've delayed for too long." He paused and raised his eyebrows. "This time, are you going to break through, or continue to suppress yourself at the high deity level like before?" Rong Xiu gently closed his eyes. When he opened them again, there were golden and black flames in his eyes. The smile on his lips deepened. "Break! Are you? In a dark space, Dumpling shouted anxiously as she walked. However, no matter how she shouted, she didn't get any response. The surrounding silence was terrifying. The rims of Tuanzi's eyes were red and filled with tears. She quickly wiped her eyes, clenched her small fists, and cheered herself on. It wasn't that you didn't want her anymore, but she was swallowed into this strange wall. As long as she continued to search, she would definitely find you. Besides, you might also be looking for her. Thinking of this, Tuanzi was motivated again and quickened her pace to move forward. Nan Suhuai and Chu Ning came in together, so they were still in the same place. However, they were also trapped in a space and didn't meet anyone else. Therefore, They could only search for an exit while trying to contact others. Chu Liues stared at the figure in front of her. Almost at first glance, she was certain that this person was the one she had seen before, the one playing the guqin. However, although they were closer, the other person's figure was still shrouded in a layer of black shadow. It was hazy and couldn't be seen clearly. Chu Liues couldn't even tell whether the other person was a man or a woman, because the voice was as ethereal as the zither, as if it came from far away. The tone was very light, but the voice was beautiful and dreamy. Listening to it made one feel relaxed and comfortable, but it was elusive. Chu Liues felt that this scene was really strange. At this moment, she couldn't see the other person's appearance and figure. Even the voice sounded like a dream. It was hard to tell if it was real or fake. However, the other person said such a sentence to her. It seemed like they knew her and had been waiting for her. Chu Liues asked tentatively, "You know me?" The person seemed to smile and said casually, "You're holding my zither score. Of course I recognize it." Zither score? Chu Liues was stunned. I didn't. Suddenly, she seemed to have thought of something, and a trace of shock flashed across her eyes. The only thing on her that was related to the zither sound was probably that water droplet. Just as this thought flashed through her mind, Chu Liues felt a strange wave coming from her dantian. The person opposite her raised his hand slightly. That water droplet rushed out of Chu Liues' body instantly. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1695. Chu Liues was shocked. Her pupils constricted, and her heart was in her throat. However, the water droplet didn't go far away. It just floated quietly in front of her. Although the surrounding light was dim, the water droplet was still bright and dazzling. "Don't worry. Now that it has recognized you as its master, I won't take it back." The voice of the person opposite her had a teasing tone. Chu Liues relaxed and calmed the waves in her heart. She cupped her fists and bowed respectfully to the person opposite her. "I lost my composure for a moment. Please forgive me, Senior." She could now confirm that this person was indeed the previous owner of the water droplet. No one had ever been able to summon the water droplet away so easily. This person was really her senior. The other party laughed again. "It's your chance to get this thing. I'm no longer its master. It's just that I haven't seen it for so long that I miss it." As he spoke, Chu Liues saw the water droplet sway gently. Then, it gradually extended into a transparent remnant page. No, actually, it couldn't be considered transparent at this time. On it, several dazzling streams of light were flowing slowly and brilliantly. Chu Liues was slightly stunned. This thing was actually a guqin score? For the past few years, she had been completely unaware of it. As if seeing through her thoughts, the person opposite her smiled and said, "This is only one of the pages. There's only a small section of incomplete music score on it. It can't be played. It's normal that you don't recognize it." Chu Liues nodded in understanding. However, she was still rather surprised. When she got this thing, she could tell that it seemed to be a page that was forcibly torn from a book. She had a lot of guesses about its origin. However, she really didn't expect it to be a guqin score. "I thought you would have come earlier. I didn't expect it to take so long." As the person spoke, his fingertips moved. A transparent book suddenly appeared out of thin air. It was flowing with brilliant colors and brilliant light. Chu Liues' eyes hurt from the light. He subconsciously turned his face away and narrowed his eyes. However, she did not raise her hand to cover her eyes. She would rather endure the pain in her eyes and stare at the book, afraid that she would miss something. She didn't even need to think to know that this book must be the zither score that the other party had mentioned earlier. That page must belong to this book. This music score has been with me for many years. Now, I can finally find new owner for it. Chu Liues' heart skipped a beat. She had always wanted to find the rest of the items, but she never had the chance. Who would have thought that all of this would be laid out right in front of her? However, this book is actually not complete. The other party's sudden change in topic made Chu Liues' heart sink slightly. Back then, they tore this good zither score into 3 pieces. Now, other than the 2 portions here, even I don't know the whereabouts of the remaining portion. That person shook his head regretfully. When Chu Liwei heard this, she felt that something was wrong. Back then, trespass? This zither score, wait? A white light suddenly flashed in Chu Liu's mind. Taizu once said that tens of thousands of years ago, the earth-shattering battle where the gods fell seemed to be for a book. Could it be this is the book? This is the book, that person said with a faint smile. Chu Liwei was shocked. She clearly didn't say anything just now, and her expression was very calm. However, why did the other party seem to know all of her thoughts like the back of his hand? This is my place. Naturally, I can peek into some of your thoughts. However, you don't have to worry too much. I can only sense a part of it, and it's mostly related to this zither score. As for the other thoughts that you've hidden deeply, it's hard for me to know. Of course, I'm not interested in those. Chu Liwei heaved a sigh of relief. She did not doubt his words at all. With the other party's strength, it was really easy for him to deal with her. There was no need for him to beat around the bush. I've embarrassed myself in front of Senior. Chu Liu's attitude was very proper, and she bowed politely. She knew very well that in front of such a person, any tricks would be useless. He might as well do it openly and honestly. However, this time, the waves in her heart didn't stop for a long time. It was obvious how precious this zither score was for so many high gods and even venerables to fight for it. She had been very emotional before, but she didn't expect that the treasure that once caused chaos in the world was in her hands. Although it was only an incomplete part, there were many cultivators in the world who wanted to get this page, but they couldn't find it. When she thought of this, Chu Liu's heart beat faster, and her blood seemed to be boiling. She knew that this thing was extraordinary. However, after knowing the truth, she was still shocked. The other party seemed to be satisfied with Chu Liu's reaction. Although this zither score was divided into 3 parts, there is still a connection between them. Since the one in your hand was the first to awaken and let you be the master, the other 2 parts will naturally follow you and let you be the master. The 3rd part has been lost for a long time, and it won't be found in a short time. Let's not talk about it for now. You can take my share first. Chu Liwei had already guessed the other party's plan, but when she heard this, she was still surprised. Such a precious treasure was actually given to her so easily. You don't have to feel burdened. Although I was its previous master, I'm now just a remnant consciousness in this zither score. Even if this zither score is complete, it's meaningless to leave it with me. The reason I've waited until now is to wait for a new master to appear. The other party's voice paused. Chu Liwei immediately felt a gaze on her. She immediately tensed up. In other words, it's you. Chu Liwei clenched her fists. So, the zither music from before was you luring me here? That's right. It's a pity that those people have been pestering you and wasting a lot of time. It's really annoying. Chu Liwei could hear a trace of impatience in the other party's voice. However, I've already chased them away. At least before you complete the fusion of these 2 zither scores, they won't disturb you again. At this point, Chu Liwei finally understood. The only thing she had to do now was to do as the other party said and reintegrate these 2 incomplete zither scores. It's just one, so it shouldn't be difficult, right? Chu Liwei thought, and immediately cupped her fists at the other party. Thank you for your generous gift, Senior. Don't be happy too early. The other party interrupted her with a smile. It won't be too late to thank me when you really do it. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1696. For some reason, Chu Liwei heard a hint of mockery in his words, as well as a hint of anticipation for a good show. She swallowed the rest of her words. Yes, I will do my best. Swish. As soon as she finished speaking, the person opposite her waved his sleeve, and the transparent book quickly flew in front of Chu Liwei. It floated quietly in front of her, one on the left and one on the right. Chu Liu's eyes scanned the book carefully. Although one of the 2 items was a thick book, and the other was a thin piece of paper, the aura they exuded was not much different. Furthermore, after approaching the book, she was able to sense a familiar feeling from it. They were of the same origin, so it was no wonder. Chu Lue suddenly thought of something and looked up. How should I address you? Senior? She had been here for so long, and the book belonged to him. She couldn't possibly not know his name. The person opposite her was silent for a moment, as if deep in thought. After a while, he said, It's been too long, and I can't remember many things clearly. You can call me Ah Jing. Ah Jing. This name was very vague, and she couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. Chu Lue was pondering in her heart when she heard the person opposite her say bluntly, I'm a man. Chu Lue. She almost forgot that he could spy on many of her thoughts. Chu Lue suddenly felt awkward. Yes, Senior Ah Jing. Fortunately, the other party didn't seem to care much about this matter. He waved his sleeve and sat on the ground. A zither suddenly appeared on his lap. Then, Chu Lue saw him gently place his hand on the zither. Chu Lue's eyelids twitched violently, and an ominous premonition surged in her heart. Senior Ah Jing, are you going to play the zither? Ah Jing looked at her strangely. Of course. Since you want to combine these two pieces of music, of course you have to have the help of the zither. If you don't even know the music, how can you perfectly combine them? Chu Lue understood. You mean that I have to understand this song before I can? Jing nodded with satisfaction. You're not too stupid. In that case, you should be able to learn it quickly. Although it sounded like a compliment, Chu Lue didn't feel happy or happy. Instead, he felt even more uneasy. She clearly remembered that when she heard this song, she was so shocked that she vomited blood. Now, the person was right in front of him, and so was the guqin. It was obvious that it was much more powerful than before. But now that things had come to this, she had no choice but to bite the bullet. Thank you, Senior, Chu Lue asked after thinking for a while. By the way, Senior Ah Jing, how long will it take for me to completely integrate these two scores? Rong Xiao and the others followed him in. If it took too long, they would be worried. Ah Jing's movements paused. He tilted his head and looked her up and down. Although she couldn't see his face and expression clearly, Chu Lue still felt that his gaze was as sharp as a steel knife. With just one glance, she felt as if her entire body, inside and out, had been seen clearly. You're a high god, a doctor, and a high-level weapon refiner. You've also just broken through to a great Xianqing master. Your talent and comprehension are bad. No wonder it recognized you as its master. He spoke slowly, but it set off perilous waves in Chu Lue's heart. This person had only looked at her from afar, and he had already found out everything about her. At this moment, Chu Lue even felt that she had no secrets left in front of him. Although the Tianjing Yuan Meridian isn't rare, the support of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan's bloodline is rare. A trace of satisfaction finally appeared in Ah Jing's voice. Chu Lue was inwardly speechless when she heard this. The Tianjing Yuan Meridian was a top-grade Yuan Meridian, but it seemed to be sparse and ordinary in his place. There was nothing special about it. Moreover, he said these words in such a calm tone. Chu Lue was even more curious about the other party's identity. However, this thought only flashed through her mind before she quickly suppressed it. No matter what, the most important thing now was to merge these two zither scores. If everything goes smoothly, it will be over in about 180 years. However, if something goes wrong in the middle, I'm afraid that it will take twice as long. Ah Jing's tone was incomparably relaxed as he said this. Therefore, you must not let down your guard during this time. Chu Lue had been trying hard to maintain a calm expression, but after hearing these two sentences, it finally cracked. What? If everything goes well, 180 years? If it doesn't go well, it will take twice as long. Then wouldn't she have to wait here until the end of time? Ah Jing looked at her with some astonishment. Why? Do you think there's a problem with the time? Chu Lue's chest tightened. It was more than a problem. There was a huge problem. How old was she now? Was she going to invest 100 years in this? Then what about Rong Xiao and Dumpling? What about her father and master? Not to mention 100 years. even if it was 10 years, the outside world would be completely different. Senior Ah Jing, can't you shorten time? Chu Luiwei spoke with difficulty. Ah Jing chuckled. This time is already short enough. Without my help, you may not be able to complete it even if you stay here for 500 years. After all, this is not an ordinary zither score. Of course, Chu Luiwei knew that this was not an ordinary zither score. However, it could easily take 100 years. If you insist on shortening the time, it's not impossible. As if sensing Chu Luiwei's dilemma, Ah Jing paused for a moment and finally relented. Chu Luiwei looked up. Ah Jing said, I can help you speed up the flow of time in this space, but correspondingly, the pressure and torture you have to bear will also increase exponentially. Can you still insist on this? Chu Luiwei held her breath and nodded seriously. Thank you, Senior. Even if she had to go through more pain and the process was more difficult, she had to do it. After all, she was no longer alone. There were many people who loved her and were waiting for her. She had to get out as soon as possible. Ah Jing seemed to have expected her choice. He chuckled and shook his head. I hope you won't regret it. Chu Luiwei's eyes were cold and stubborn. I won't regret anything I've done in my life. This time it was the same. Good. Ah Jing suddenly laughed. Since you have the courage, then let me see if you have the ability. Apart from other things, this little girl's courage was quite to his liking. The key was whether she could do it or not. Clang! He waved his fingertips, and the sound of a zither broke through the air. Chu Luiwei felt a chill and immediately felt the atmosphere around her suddenly change. The sound of a zither was bleak, and the world was filled with killing intent. Digression. Merry Christmas. The New Year's Day event is here. Everyone, are you ready? It starts at midnight on January 1st and ends at midnight on January 3rd. The event lasts for 3 days. 1. The comment section. Every day, 6%, 16%, 26%, 36%, 46%, 56%, 66%, 76%, 86%, 96% will get 66 Xiaoshan dollars. 2. Every day, choose 3 favorite comments in the comment section and win a share. Finally, recommend Mr. Anne's new book, Mr. She wants to announce it every day. Pet article, no abuse, strong woman, group favorite. After Yuan Shi became popular. Anti-fans, no matter how beautiful she is, she's uncultured. That afternoon, the best university in China posted on its Weibo, let me introduce the youngest doctoral supervisor in our university, Professor Yuan Shi. Anti-fans, what's the use of being a top student? In the end, she has to bow down to her sugar daddy. The next day, Yuan Shi appeared at the International Economic Conference. Her name tag was signed, CEO of Chimu Pharmaceutical Group. Anti-fans, she earns so much money and doesn't even know how to contribute to the country. 3 days later, the official news was released. The latest nuclear submarine has been released. Thank you to the chief designer, Yuan Shi, and all the research and development team. Anti-fans, can't afford to offend goodbye. After the wedding, a reporter asked Shijio, Ninth Master, how did you get Goddess Ruan? Shijio silently opened a diary. Wife-chasing diary. 1. Make a ranking for my baby. 2. Vote for my baby. 3. Show support for my baby. 4. Book the entire theater for my baby's movie. 5. Join my baby's fan club. As everyone knew, Goddess Ruan had a super rich fan. Ninth Master Shijio. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1697. Chu Luiwei's heart skipped a beat, and she immediately became alert. She knew how terrifying the sound of the zither was. She had vomited blood when she was outside the wall, let alone now. The two of them were so close, and the only thing she could do was accept it. Moreover, according to Senior Ah Jing, if she wanted to combine the two pieces of music, she had to understand the music first. Chu Luiwei took a deep breath and calmed herself down. Then, in the midst of the clanging music, she raised her hand and reached for the book. However, just as her fingertips touched the side of the transparent book, the ladder suddenly flew up. Whoosh! Chu Luiwei looked up instinctively, only to see countless transparent pages scattered all over the sky. That book had actually scattered just like that. In an instant, all she could see were the transparent pages glowing with a faint, gorgeous light. They were scattered messily and randomly in every corner of the space, almost filling the entire space. Chu Luiwei looked around, and there were flashing lights everywhere. It was extremely gorgeous. However, this scene caused her heart to instantly surge with an intense uneasiness. Actually, there are only 3 pieces of music in that book. In that booklet, except for one real one, the rest were all fake. If you want to perfectly combine the 2 pieces of music, the first step is to find the real one among the tens of thousands of pieces. Ah Jing's voice was still casual, but in Chu Luiwei's ears, it was no different from a sudden clap of thunder. It shocked her to the core. Only one piece among the tens of thousands of pieces was real? How long would she have to search? Most importantly, she didn't even know how to distinguish the real from the fake. Actually, you don't have to worry about this. The first piece of music is with you, and it has already recognized you as its owner. It will be much easier to find the second piece. However, the differences between these pieces of music are very small, so you have to look at each piece carefully. Although most of these pieces of music are fake, looking at each piece requires a lot of force and mental strength. With your current strength, you should be able to finish one in 3 days. That was also the reason why he said that he would need 100 years to complete this task. Chu Luiwei's eyelids twitched violently. One every 3 days. There were tens of thousands of them here. Who knew how long it would take? Needless to say, this was only the first step. In the face of Chu Luiwei's silence, Ah Jing thought for a moment and comforted him. It's okay. Practice makes perfect. In the future, your reading speed will definitely become faster and faster. With his status and personality, it was rare for him to say such comforting words. If it weren't for the fact that Chu Luiwei was the only heir to this score, he would never have been so kind and patient. However, these words obviously had no effect on Chu Luiwei. She closed her eyes and rubbed her temples. After a long silence, she accepted reality. Since they had already come this far, there was no turning back. Then, he could only hope that it would be completed quickly. With a thought, she recalled the remnant page that belonged to her back in her body. Probably because it sensed the existence of the second score, it didn't turn into a water droplet this time. Instead, it remained in the form of a remnant page, floating quietly in her dantian. On it, flowing light flashed and energy surged. Chu Luiwei exhaled softly and reached out her hand. A transparent piece of paper nearby floated into her hand. The first one. At the same time, the sound of the zither also fell clearly into her ears. The killing intent was biting cold. In a mountain range thousands of miles away, there were continuous mountains and mist lingering around them. The rich energy of heaven and earth filled it, adding a bit of celestial aura. Especially the tallest mountain in the middle. It was steep and tall, majestic and beautiful. At a glance, it really looked like a fairyland. On the mountain, there were steps that went up from the bottom to the top. At the top of the mountain, there was a mountain gate piled up with stones. A wooden plaque hung horizontally on it. Wu Go Peak. This was the most noble of the 18 peaks of the Nan family. Almost all of the important figures of the Nan family were gathered here. Ordinary people didn't even have the right to take a few steps, let alone go up the mountain. On Wu Go Peak, there were many courtyards scattered in picturesque disorder. All the noble people of the Nan family lived there. At the top of the mountain, there was a magnificent building. At this moment, a tall and burly figure was standing in front of the door, looking from afar. This person was the head of the Nan family, Nan Yifan. He looked to be about 40 years old. Although there were already traces of age on his face, one could still see some of the handsomeness of his youth. In particular, the reddish-purple brocade robe and the aura around him made him look even more noble and arrogant. He stood there, looking into the distance with his hands behind his back, as if waiting for something. Ed, first young master and second young mistress, haven't sent back any news. I'm afraid you won't be able to wait until today. Why don't you go back and rest first? Behind Nan Yifan, an old man who looked like a servant advised. I know. Nan Yifan nodded. It's just that they've been gone for quite some time this time. I do miss Yi a little. Come to think of it, Yi had never left him for such a long time in the past. I wonder if everything went well on their side. After all, it was not a small matter. It was impossible for him not to be worried. The old servant narrowed his weathered eyes with a smile. With first young master and the two elders around, you don't have to worry. Besides, second young mistress has always been clever and intelligent. Isn't the task you've given her a piece of cake? Don't worry. Hearing his words, Nan Yifan's face also revealed a smug and doting smile. He only had this one daughter. She was beautiful and talented, so of course he doted on her very much. This time, it was rare for him to be so firm with Nan Yi. But at the end of the day, it was for her own good. Although that child was very dissatisfied with him because of this matter, she should understand his painstaking efforts after a few years when she matured. I hope so. Nan Yifan retracted his gaze and planned to turn around and enter the house. However, he had just taken a step when he suddenly felt something, and his expression changed abruptly. The old servant beside him immediately sensed that something was wrong and asked with concern, "Head, what's wrong?" He had followed Nan Yifan for several years and rarely saw such an expression on his face. Nan Yifan clenched his fists, and there seemed to be huge waves in his eyes. Yi's aura suddenly disappeared. As soon as he said that, the old servant's expression changed instantly. How could this be? Nan Yifan quickly pushed the door open and entered. The old man followed closely behind and immediately locked the door. After entering, Nan Yifan took out a jade pendant. Inside, for light spots, floated gently. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1698. Seeing this, Nan Yifan finally heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the aura of Nan Yi and the others was stored in it. If anything happened to any of them, this jade pendant would immediately react. Judging from the current situation, these four people should still be alive. But why did they suddenly lose contact? Nan Yifan only had one son and one daughter, and he loved them very much. Therefore, Nan Yifan specially made a lot of preparations to be able to contact them anytime and anywhere. But now, the connection was suddenly cut off. How could he not be anxious? Uncle Dan, something must have happened to them. Nan Yifan said resolutely. The old man called Uncle Dan also frowned. What about eldest young master? You. Nan Yifan's face darkened. He can't be contacted either. If not for this, he wouldn't be so nervous. Uncle Dan didn't expect the matter to be so serious and hurriedly tried to persuade him. Patriarch, don't worry. You see, they're still fine now, aren't they? As for why they can't be contacted, there must be a reason. I'll investigate immediately. With that, he turned around and planned to walk out. Nan Yifan put away the jade pendant and gritted his teeth. There's no need to investigate. Something must have happened in the god-slaying tomb. Other than this, he couldn't think of any other reason. He pondered for a moment, then walked out without any hesitation. I'll go to the god-slaying tomb personally. Uncle Dan was shocked. Patriarch, aren't you in too much of a hurry to go now? The clan. There's no time. Nan Yifan stopped in his tracks, and his face turned even uglier. Even if they encountered any trouble in the past, this has never happened before. This time, they must have encountered great danger. What kind of place is the god-slaying tomb? If we don't go there in time, I'm afraid it will be too late. Uncle Dan wanted to say something, but hesitated. He was actually very worried about the situation of those people. But many people in the clan didn't know about them going there this time. If the patriarch went there, the news would definitely spread like wildfire. At that time, he was afraid, Uncle Dan, now is not the time to care about that. If something really happened to Yuxing and Yi, Nan Yifan didn't finish his sentence. But his expression said it all. No matter what the consequences were, as long as she was fine, everything was fine. But if he was gone, then there would be nothing left. At that time, he wouldn't even have the chance to make up for it or regret it. Uncle Dan was shocked and immediately lowered his head. Patriarch is right. This old servant was muddle-headed. Nan Yifun waved his hand. I know you're looking out for the big picture, but this matter involves the god-slaying mound. I'm afraid you can't care about that. He frowned and thought for a moment. Please invite Luo Yin and the others to come with us. Uncle Dan was stunned for a moment. Then, he bowed respectfully. Yes, even with Elder Wu Peng and Elder Bai Tong accompanying him, something still happened. Most likely, the situation over there was even more complicated than he had expected. The more people there, the safer would be. Uncle Dan opened the door and went out. His figure soon disappeared from sight. Nan Yifun paced back and forth, waiting anxiously. This happened too suddenly. They didn't even have time to send out any distress signals before they were directly. What kind of situation was this? Nan Yifun didn't dare to think too much. There had always been various rumors about the god-slaying mound. But the 2 times he had been there in the past, he had been scared but not in danger. So he had always felt that the god-slaying mound was not as scary as the rumors said. Until this time, he began to regret it secretly. It was still a little risky to only send Elder Wu Peng and Elder Bai Tong there. If only he had known, but there was no medicine for regret in this world. The only thing he could do now was to silently pray that those people would be safe before they arrived at the god-slaying mound. Soon, Uncle Dan rushed over with a few people. Nan Yifun quickly glanced around and was stunned. Where's Luo Yin? In the entire Nan family, Luo Yin's combat strength could be ranked in the top 5, and he had always doted on Nan Yi. So this time, Nan Yifun had made up his mind to bring Luo Yin with him from the beginning. Uncle Dan's expression was a little strange. Luo Yin is not here. Not here. He has always been obsessed with cultivation and rarely goes out. Why is he suddenly not here? Suddenly, Nan Yifun's voice stopped. There was only one reason that could make Luo Yin leave so quietly. Could it be, seeing that he seemed to have guessed it, Uncle Dan nodded helplessly. He seems to have already left for the god-slaying mound. As expected, for a moment, Nan Yifun's mood became even more complicated. Luo Yin had gone, so logically speaking, Yi and the others had gained a great helper. But why did something still happen? And, judging from the time, they seemed to have met with an accident after Luo Yan's arrival. This made Nan Yifun even more worried. He suppressed all the emotions that were surging in his chest and abdomen. He didn't hesitate any longer and directly moved out. Uncle Dan, stay here and deal with the family affairs. The rest of you follow me. No matter what, he had to bring Yi and the others back safely. Phoenix Shrine. In the main hall, Yi Zhao sat at the head of the table, and the elders were divided into 2 sides. Only 4 of the 5 elders came today. Elder Yi Gong did not appear here. Yi Zhao glanced at the empty seat. Yi Gong is still not here today. Elder Yi Jiao looked a little embarrassed and responded in a low voice. Yes, ever since Yi Ran's accident, First Elder has been sad and hasn't adjusted his emotions. The few people present had different expressions. How was he sad for Yi Ran? He was clearly sad that his years of hard work had gone up in smoke. All these years, he had devoted himself to nurturing Yi Ran and had spent a lot of effort. How could he accept such an outcome? Yi Zhao couldn't be bothered to expose him and nodded lightly. Then let him rest well. Anyway, even if he didn't come, it wouldn't affect them much. After that, they reported and summarized some of the clan's matters as usual. Yi Zhao made the decisions one by one. In fact, since the end of the ancestral worship ceremony, nothing major had happened at Phoenix Shrine Mountain. Recently, the children in the clan seemed to be cultivating more diligently than before. Elder Yi Shang smiled and said, probably because they were stimulated by dumpling at the ancestral worship ceremony. At the mention of dumpling, a smile appeared on Yi Zhao's icy face. Dumpling is younger than them, but much stronger. Of course, they can't be completely unmoved. It's not bad that they have the heart to catch up. Unfortunately, no one knew when Dumpling would return after leaving. Yi Zhao thought regretfully. Suddenly, A reddish-gold feather floated in the main hall. His expression changed, and he suddenly stood up. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1699. The feather lightly drew a line of words in the air. Grandpa Clan Leader, come save me and Ayu. After seeing the line of words, Yi Zhao's eyes narrowed. Soon, the line of words transformed into a red-gold flame in the air and quietly disappeared. As for the feather, it was destroyed as well. Everyone in the main hall was shocked. This is Dumpling's request for help. Elder Yishang asked uncertainly. Yi Zhao's expression was grave. That's right. Who else could send a request for help from so far away other than Dumpling? Looks like something happened to them. If not for the desperate situation, Dumpling would never have taken the initiative to ask for their help. Elder EU stood up, straightened his collar, and said with a smile, "It's rare that little Dumpling would take the initiative to ask us for help. Of course, we have to support her. Clan Leader, how about I make a trip?" Dumpling had already opened her 4th meridian. As one of the 5 elders, it was easy for him to find Dumpling. Yi Zhao nodded. After they left Phoenix God Mountain, they seemed to have gone straight to the God-slaying mound. Elder EU nodded. He had just taken a step when he suddenly stopped. Clan Leader, young lord is asking for help. Should we send a few more people? The God-slaying mound was very strange and dangerous. He could not guarantee that he could bring them out safely. Yi Zhao's lips moved, but he did not say anything. It was as though he wanted to say something. The remaining elders looked at each other in dismay. There was nothing to hesitate about. What was the clan leader thinking? Elder Yishang also stood up. You still have to deal with Fengwang Valley. Let me go this time. He was the 2nd elder and was more powerful than the 5th elder, Elder EU. Other than that, I will find 2nd elder. Please don't. Elder EU stroked his chin and sighed. Most of the matters at Fengwang Valley have already been settled. Even if I leave now, it will not affect much. Besides, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to improve her relationship with Tuanzi. If I miss this chance, who knows when I will get another one. Don't snatch it from me. He was the youngest of the 5 great elders, and he had always been straightforward in his words and actions. Over time, everyone had gotten used to it. Elder Yishang could not help but laugh and shake his head helplessly. But how can you do it by yourself? Or, before he could finish his sentence, Yi Zhao interrupted. I will go with him. As soon as he finished speaking, the hall instantly fell into silence. The elders looked at each other in dismay. Clearly, they did not expect that he would actually plan to go personally. Elder Yishang was stunned for a moment before he asked hesitantly, Elder EU, you're going? Under normal circumstances, Yi Zhao would rarely leave the Divine Phoenix Mountain unless something major happened. After all, he was the clan leader. His every word and action had great influence. Yi Zhao nodded expressionlessly. This is a serious matter. It is safer for me to go with EU. He was always a man of his word. His attitude and tone were very firm. The elders in the hall did not stop him. Dumpling was the young lord and was appointed by their ancestors. They had to protect her no matter what. It was understandable that Yi Zhao would go. After making the decision, Yi Zhao and Elder EU did not hesitate. They set off for the God-slaying grave. At this point, Chu Luan naturally had no idea what was happening in the outside world. In the dim space, a ray of light shone down from above. Chu Luiwes sat cross-legged and held a transparent piece of paper in his hand. On the paper, dazzling light flashed. It was beautiful. However, Chu Luiwes was not in the mood to admire it. Her eyes were fixed on the paper. She carefully observed the trajectory and pattern of the flowing light, afraid that she would miss something. This was actually a very taxing task, and he couldn't afford to slack off at all. At the same time, the force around her was rapidly depleting. She frowned slightly. Her lips were pale, and she looked haggard. However, she still held the paper in her hand tightly. She did not dare to close her eyes and rest. The ground around her was littered with papers. Although they were also transparent, there was no dazzling light on them. Every one of them was cracked and seemed to be useless. Chu Luiwei had seen those before. They were fake. They were all fake. Among the tens of thousands of papers, only one was real. She had only seen about 100 of them. How could she find a real one so easily? Here, she was focused on studying every zither score. She almost could not feel the passage of time. Only the increasing pressure and pain on her body constantly reminded her that time was passing by. The only thing worth being happy about was that she was reading faster than before. Previously, she read one every 3 days. Now, she read one every 2.5 days. However, this happiness did not last long. Because in addition to holding on to these real and fake music scores, Chu Luiyue also had to endure the test of the zither. Since Ah Jing began to play the zither, Chu Luiyue was shrouded in a terrifying murderous aura. There was almost no room for relaxation in this song. From beginning to end, it was full of fighting spirit and murderous aura. In a trance, Chu Luiyue felt that she was in a vast world. The sky was dark, the clouds were rolling, and the wind was roaring. In the boundless wilderness, countless people were killing each other. Their shouts shook the sky, and their momentum was shocking. Looking around, there were messy bloodstains and cold corpses everywhere. Everywhere was filled with a chill. It was like purgatory on earth. She could even smell the strong and terrible smell of blood. It was almost nauseating. It wasn't that she had never seen a battle before. She had even fought on the battlefield herself, killing countless people in the midst of life and death with the flash of her blade and the shadow of her sword. She had seen the scene of corpses strewn all over the place more than once. However, that scene paled in comparison to the scene that was constantly emerging in her mind. It was not worth mentioning at all. She wanted to throw all these images out of her mind, but it was in vain, because all of this was a part of the song. Therefore, she could only choose to accept it. She constantly forced herself to concentrate all her energy and listen to every note of the song. This was undoubtedly an extremely cruel torture for Chu Luiyue. Her whole body seemed to be cut in half. Half of her attention was focused on the music score in her hand, while the other half was constantly experiencing the bloody and terrible things. Finally, a stream of red blood slowly overflowed from the corner of her mouth. It dripped on the back of her hand. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1700. Chu Luiyue reached out her other hand nonchalantly and quickly wiped away the drop of blood. And her eyes, from beginning to end, did not move away from the score. Although it was painful and difficult, she knew that this was the path she had chosen from the beginning. No matter what, she had to continue walking on her own. She finally finished reading the piece in her hand. Chu Luiyue pursed her lips. Still not. But there was no disappointment on her face. She rubbed the piece a few times and threw it on the ground. The moment she finished reading it, the luster on it had already disappeared. At this moment, it was lying there quietly, no different from a piece of waste paper. Chu Luiyue raised her hand without hesitation, picked up another piece, and continued reading. In fact, she was already prepared to flip through all the music scores here. Her only hope was that time could flow faster. When she didn't want to go out, decades had already passed outside. This thought flashed through her mind quickly, then she quickly suppressed it. Clang! The zither didn't stop. Cultivation didn't stop. Big brother? Uncle Luo Yen? Elder Wu Peng? Elder Bai Tong? In the dark and cramped space, Nan Yi's legs went weak. She slowly squatted down and hugged herself. Deep despair surged from the bottom of her heart and gradually drowned her. There was no response. Still no response. She couldn't remember how long she had been walking here, but she couldn't find the exit. She didn't know how many times she had shouted until her voice was hoarse, but she still didn't get any response. It was as if there was no one else here except for her. The surroundings were terrifyingly quiet. She could even hear her own breathing and heartbeat. This made her even more afraid. If she was trapped here for the rest of her life, what should she do? She didn't want to die yet. Nanny finally couldn't hold it in anymore and sobbed softly. And in the depths of her heart, her hatred for Chu Luiyue deepened. If it wasn't for that woman, how could she have fallen to such a state? Everything was fine at first, but ever since she met them, she had been unlucky. Now, it was even more likely that he would have to throw his life away. She didn't know where the hell this place was. Ever since she was swallowed here, she had lost contact with everyone else. More importantly, he couldn't even send out a request for help here. Right now, her only hope was her father. But before that, even she wasn't sure if she could hold on. After crying for a while, Nan-E was tired and sat down on the ground. However, as soon as she sat down, she felt something beneath her. She was shocked and screamed as she jumped up. Ah! Sharp screams reverberated in this silent space, seeming especially mournful and terrifying. Nan-E hurriedly covered her mouth and looked at the ground in panic. When she saw what it was, she sucked in a breath of cold air and suddenly opened her eyes wide. That was actually half a bone, because most of the bones were buried underground and the exposed part seemed to be broken from the middle. Nan-E was unable to recognize what kind of bones they were. The only thing he could be sure of was that it belonged to a human cultivator. Also, the bone was lustrous, and one could tell at a glance that its owner's realm was not low when he was alive. But how could Nan-E care about this now? She stared fixedly at the half of the white bone. Her mind was in a mess, and her mind was in a mess. Why was there such a bone here? She didn't notice it at all before. She didn't know who it belonged to. She had walked in the divine ruins for so long and had never seen half a bone. Now wait. At this thought, Nan-E's mind finally cleared up. No, there must be a problem here. She had traveled day and night in the divine ruins with Big Brother and the others. They had walked so far, there was nothing but broken tombstones all over the ground. This was the first bone she had seen in the god-slaying tomb. But why would it appear here? She stared at the bone for a long time and finally couldn't help but take 2 steps forward. Suddenly, a weak and hoarse voice entered her ears. "Let me out. I can take you out." Nan-E's heart skipped a beat. She took 2 steps back and stared at the bone as if she had seen a ghost. She was sure that your voice just now came from below. Who are you?" Because of fear, her voice trembled badly. After a pause, the voice sounded again. "You don't need to know. You just need to know that I can help you leave this place. Do you want to make this deal or not?" This tone was terrifyingly calm, but it also carried a force that made people unconsciously believe in it. Nan-E tried her best to calm herself down. If I help you, can you guarantee that you won't hurt me after we get out?" The voice seemed to laugh. "You're not worthy of me doing it myself." It seemed that he didn't take Nan-E seriously at all. Nan-E was furious, but she didn't dare to flare up. On second thought, this person might really not be an ordinary person. "Since you don't like me, why ask me for help?" The other party was silent for a moment before saying, "Of course it's because you can help me. You can take out that thing around your neck and use it." Nan-E's heart skipped a beat, and she subconsciously touched the chain around her neck. Only Father and Big Brother knew about this thing. How could he tell so easily? As if sensing her hesitation, the other party continued. "You have to know that without my help, you won't be able to get out even if you're trapped here for more than 100 years. These words finally made Nan-E make up her mind. She gritted her teeth. "Okay, I'll help you. However, you have to keep your promise to me." As she spoke, she finally took off the chain around her neck. It was an ordinary-looking silver chain. It was very thin and decorated with a fingernail-sized ruby. It was dark red in color and pure in texture. Even if an ordinary person saw it, they would only think that it was an ordinary ruby necklace. Nan-E held the ruby in her hand and closed her eyes. Soon, a totem flashed between her brows. A short sword suddenly flew out from the ruby. Its entire body was bright and extremely sharp. Nan-E grabbed the short sword and dug it into the ground. A deep mark quickly appeared on the ground. Nan-E didn't stop. After a while, the ground around the bone completely loosened. Swoosh! The bone suddenly darted out. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1701. Before Nan-E could react, she suddenly felt a strong force attacking her. Immediately after, her body fell forward uncontrollably. At this moment, The darkness in front of her was suddenly cut open by a white light. She subconsciously closed her eyes. At this moment, her body suddenly fell. Outside the Scarlet Soul Forest, in the void, a few ripples suddenly spread out rapidly. Immediately after, a few figures walked out one after another. The person in front was dressed in a dark purple robe and had a cold expression. It was the head of the Nan family, Nan Yifan. Behind him were 4 elders of the family. As soon as he arrived, Nan Yifan quickly scanned the surroundings and frowned. He sensed the aura of Nan Yi and the others. After looking for a while, he lifted his foot and walked toward a certain place in the Scarlet Soul Forest. They should have entered the Scarlet Soul Forest from here. The elders behind him hurriedly followed. Because they knew that this matter involved Nan Yuxing and Nan Yi, they didn't dare to say anything in front of Nan Yifan. They would do whatever he said. The few of them quickly rushed over. However, just as Nan Yifan and the others were about to enter, there was a sudden fluctuation behind them. They immediately looked back and were on high alert. Who would come to the Godslayer tomb at this time? And it was the same place as them. A black spatial crack was suddenly torn open. Then 2 figures walked out one after another. When he saw the faces of the people who came, Nan Yifan was stunned. Wasn't this the head of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, Yi Zhao, and one of the 5 elders, Elder Yu? The Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan almost never interacted with the human race. The reason why Nan Yifan could recognize them at a glance was because he had met them by chance in the past. Although it was only a one-time encounter, he had always remembered them clearly. So now that he saw these 2 familiar faces, he immediately remembered. Nan Yifan's hanging heart relaxed slightly, but at the same time, more questions arose. Why did they suddenly come to this place? There was no need to mention Elder Yu, but Yi Zhao rarely left the Phoenix God Mountain. Today, they had actually appeared together in the Scarlet Soul Forest outside the God-slaying tomb. It was hard not to overthink. However, no matter how he felt in his heart, he still had to put on a show. Nan Yifan quickly adjusted his expression, took a step forward, cupped his hands politely, and said with a smile, "Haha, isn't this Patriarch Yi Zhao? What wind blew you here?" Compared to his enthusiasm, Yi Zhao's attitude was much colder. He only glanced at Nan Yifan indifferently, then quickly retracted his gaze, as if he had not seen this person at all. He only turned his head and said to Elder Yu, "They should have entered from here." Elder Yu nodded. Of course, they would not mistake Dumpling's aura. But why would I bump into someone from the Nan family here? He looked in that direction out of the corner of his eye, but did not respond to Nan Yifan's words. What a joke! The Patriarch had always been blunt with the human clan. Now that Dumpling had an accident, time was even more pressing. How could he be in the mood to exchange pleasantries with Nan Yifan? Yi Zhao Duo's attitude made Nan Yifan very embarrassed. The smile on his face stiffened for a moment, but soon returned to normal. In fact, he had expected such a reaction from the other party. After so many years, which of the 2 great ancient mythological beasts did not have their eyes on the top of their heads and were extremely arrogant? Although he was not convinced, the other party had such confidence, so he had to admit it. Nan Yifan had a noble status and was strong himself. For many years, it was almost always others who looked at him with disdain. There weren't many situations like this where he tried to curry favor with others and was even rejected by them. If it were someone else, they might have been lying on the ground. But the other party was Yi Zhao. He really could not afford to offend him. Nan Yifan swallowed his anger, pretended nothing had happened, and continued to ask, "Patriarch Yi Zhao, are you also here to look for someone?" These words attracted Elder Yu's attention. He raised his eyebrows. Also, Nan Yifan's heart tightened, and he suddenly felt that he had misspoken. He had unconsciously said, "also." But thinking of the other party's identity, this matter did not seem to be a taboo. So what if they knew? Would Yi Zhao meddle in the affairs of the human clan? After thinking for a moment, Nan Yifan said frankly, "Yes, my daughter came to the God-slaying tomb some time ago, but there was suddenly no news of her today. I was worried, so I wanted to come over and take a look myself." He only mentioned Nan Yi and did not mention Nan Yuxing and the others. This was a serious matter. If the news of Nan Yuxing's accident also spread, the Nan family would probably be in chaos. Anyway, everyone knew that he had always doted on Nan Yi, so it was normal for him to make a special trip here for her. A look of understanding flashed across Elder Yu's eyes, but he did not reply. Nan Yifan could not help but ask, "May I know who the two of you are here to look for?" The God-slaying tomb is vast and full of danger. If we join forces, we might be able to find her faster. Yes, he wanted to join forces with Yi Zhao. Although the other party was few in number, they were powerful. Moreover, it would be even better if he could use this opportunity to get closer to the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. He had wishful thinking, but Yi Zhao was not interested at all. He didn't even spare her a glance, and with a cold and solemn expression on his face, he lifted his foot and walked towards the Scarlet Soul Forest. Nan Yifan was rebuffed, and his face was also a little embarrassed. But Yi Zhao was famous for his bad temper and arrogance. Even if he was angry, he did not dare to do anything to him. Besides, the most important thing now was to find Nan Yi and the others. Behind him, several elders secretly exchanged glances and did not dare to breathe loudly. Nan Yifan clenched his fists and took a deep breath. "All right, let's hurry up." After saying that, he lifted his foot and walked forward. As they walked, they all sensed that something was wrong. Nan Yifan's expression became more and more strange, and his footsteps became hesitant. This direction, why was it the same as Yi Zhao and the others? Almost at the same time, Elder Yu also turned around and looked at Nan Yifan with a faint smile. "Patriarch Nan, if you want to find someone, go ahead. Why do you have to go with us?" Nan Yifan felt embarrassed and braced himself to explain. "Elder Yu, it's really a misunderstanding. We didn't mean to follow you, but my daughter and the others seem to have entered the God-slaying tomb from here, so..." Seeing that he did not seem to be lying, Elder Yu glanced at Yi Zhao hesitantly. The Crimson Soul Forest was so big. Where could they not enter from? This was too much of a coincidence, wasn't it? Nan Yifan immediately realized something when he saw this reaction. "Patriarch Yi Zhao. Maybe the person you're looking for went in with Yi and the others?" There was a trace of excitement in his expression. "I think it's more convenient for us to move together, don't you think?" Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1702. Yi Zhao frowned slightly. After a moment, he continued to walk forward without saying anything. Elder Yu was best at guessing his thoughts and understood that this was a tacit agreement. Although they did not interact much with humans, the situation this time was a little special. Nan Yifan's words were not completely unreasonable. It was not that easy to quickly find Dumpling and the rest in this huge Godslayer mound. If the people they were looking for entered the Godslayer mound together, it might be faster. Elder Yu smiled. "In that case, Patriarch Nan, please." Nan Yifan's eyes lit up. They agreed. He was just trying, but he did not expect them to really agree. This made Nan Yifan's originally anxious and uneasy heart feel a lot more comforted. The Nan family was indeed big and powerful. However, compared to the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, they were still inferior. Now that they could move together with Yi Zhao and the rest, it could be considered a friendship. Even in the entire Divine Ruins world, how many people could do that? Okay. Nan Yifan hurriedly responded and followed them. Originally, he wanted to go over and talk to Yi Zhao, but Elder Yu was in the middle, and it was really difficult to communicate. Moreover, Yi Zhao's aura was heavy, and ordinary people could not even get close to him. Nan Yifan saw that his expression was cold and did not seem to be in a good mood. After thinking about it, he tactfully did not disturb him and just quietly followed a few steps away. They could not use force in the Crimson Soul Forest, so they naturally walked forward step by step. As they walked, Nan Yifan kept thinking in his heart, who exactly did Yi Zhao and the rest come here to find? Although they hid it very well, Nan Yifan still saw the trace of worry in their eyes. They were definitely not here to seek revenge. It looked more like they were looking for someone important. Nan Yifan was even more puzzled. There are not many people in the world who could alarm Yi Zhao, right? He was probably an important person in the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Nan Yifan was nervous and uneasy, but there was also a trace of anticipation in his heart. Perhaps Yi and the others had really bumped into the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. If they really encountered some trouble together and went through difficulties together, their relationship might be able to take another step forward. Thinking of this, Nan Yifan's mood immediately relaxed a lot. He had never considered whether Nan Yi and the rest would offend the other party. What a joke. Even if she couldn't recognize the other party, Elder Wu Peng and the others were here, so they would definitely be able to see through the other party's identity. They couldn't wait to curry favor with the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix clan. So how could they possibly oppose the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix clan? However, things were often unpredictable. Nan Yifan couldn't have imagined what kind of cruel reality would await him. Suddenly, Yi Zhao stopped in his tracks and stared straight ahead. Nan Yifan had no choice but to stop as well. He tilted his head and followed his line of sight. What he saw made him frown. The forest not far ahead was a mess. It seemed that a fierce battle had broken out here. But this place was the Scarlet Soul Forest. Fighting here, wasn't it seeking death? Suddenly, an elder at the side exclaimed, "Patriarch, that seems to be eldest young master's clothes." Nan Yifan was shocked and hurriedly took a few steps forward to take a closer look. When he saw the torn corners of the clothes scattered on the ground and the messy bloodstains, Nan Yifan's mind buzzed. It really was Yuxing's clothes. Did he fight here? But he clearly knew that he couldn't use force in the Scarlet Soul Forest. How could he have caused such a big trouble for himself? The few scarlet leaves scattered on the ground dispelled Nan Yifan's last hope. There were no fallen leaves in the entire Scarlet Soul Forest. Only this place had them. Something must have happened. Patriarch, don't be anxious. Maybe this blood isn't Eldest Young Master's. Eldest Young Master is powerful, and Elder Wu Peng and the others are accompanying him. He'll definitely be fine. Nan Yifan clenched his fists. Nan Yuxing and the rest were indeed not in danger. But judging from the situation, they must have been injured. He just didn't know what had happened to cause such a situation. Elder EU touched his chin. Patriarch, this bloodstain doesn't have Dumpling's aura. Yi Zhao nodded. This Scarlet Soul Forest might be very dangerous to humans, but it wasn't a threat to Dumpling. It would be strange if she was injured here. Most likely, she met with trouble after entering the God-slaying mound. Yi Zhao glanced at the mess on the ground expressionlessly before continuing to walk forward. He naturally wouldn't care too much about irrelevant people and things. Nan Yifan clenched his fists and finally shifted his gaze away and followed him. They weren't here. The most important thing now was to enter the God-slaying mound and find their traces. The place where they found the bloodstain was actually at the edge of the Scarlet Soul Forest. They just needed to walk forward a little more, and they would be out. Unfortunately, something happened to Nan Yuxing and the rest. Nan Yifan felt depressed, and his face became gloomier. After a while, the group finally walked out of the Scarlet Soul Forest in silence. The view in front of them suddenly widened. The sky was gray with thick layers of clouds. Looking into the distance, there was an endless plain. A cold and gloomy aura instantly hit them in the face. Faintly, one could smell a trace of desolate blood. Nan Yifan's heart skipped a beat. Behind him, an elder couldn't help but ask in a low voice, "Patriarch, don't you feel that the God-slaying mound seems a little different?" Nan Yifan nodded. It was indeed different. He had been here before, but he had never felt such a strong, gloomy, and cold aura between heaven and earth. It almost made people tremble from the bottom of their hearts. He couldn't tell what the difference was, but it had changed. Elder EU walked to Yi Zhao's side. The smile on his face gradually faded, and there was a hint of coldness and seriousness between his brows. The evil aura here is even stronger, he said. Yi Zhao nodded. This wasn't a good sign. They had just entered the God-slaying mound, but they already felt such a shocking, evil aura. If they continued to go in, no wonder Dumpling chose to ask for help. Yizhao looked around and vaguely determined a direction. When Nan Yifan saw this, he gritted his teeth and chose to follow closely behind. At this point, he couldn't detect the aura of those people at all. But the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan was different. They had amazing talent and sensitivity in this aspect. The God-slaying mound was so big, and Nan Yuxing and the rest had completely cut off contact with him. The best way was to follow Yizhao and the rest. At this time, Yizhao was thinking about Dumpling and didn't pay attention to Nan Yifan at all. Just like this, the group of people headed into the depths of the God-slaying mound. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1703. Time passed silently. Chu Luiyue held a transparent music score tightly in her hands. The dazzling light on it almost dazzled her eyes. From the beginning until now, she had not stopped at all and looked at it one by one. The force in her body was also being consumed rapidly in this process. However, every time her force was exhausted, the transparent remnant page in her dantian would surge with more force and pour into her limbs and bones. This was the force that she had been accumulating over the years. With the support of this force, Chu Luiyue was able to hold on until now. Moreover, when this force flowed through her body, it was like a surging river that constantly washed her flesh and bones. Imperceptibly, her physical body was becoming stronger and stronger with each tempering. In other words, on the whole, Chu Luiyue's strength was actually increasing all the time. However, this process was too painful and torturous. Every time her energy was exhausted, she felt like a fish on the verge of death, struggling desperately. After receiving the support of this new force, this pain would slowly lessen. However, this would not last for long because this force would still be consumed quickly. Therefore, a new cycle began again and again, over and over again. Chu Luiyue could not remember how many times she had gone through this extreme process. Moreover, all of this was still going on, and there was no sign of it stopping. Needless to say, the chilling sound of the zither was still lingering in her ears. To anyone, this was an extremely torturous experience. If one's mind was not firm enough, perhaps they would have already been defeated. Chu Luiyue could only rely on her last bit of willpower to grit her teeth and persevere. On the surface, she seemed to be no different from before. She was still fine from head to toe, except for a little blood stain at the corner of her mouth, which was not eye-catching. However, in reality, the inside of her body had already been turned upside down, and in her mind, she was experiencing a terrible storm. The sound of the zither kept reverberating in her ears, as if she could see corpses everywhere, and the smell of blood filling the sky. The blood in Chu Luiyue's body also seemed to be boiling. Her body began to tremble slightly, and the music score in her hand fell. Clang! The sound of the zither suddenly stopped. Jing looked at her and asked calmly, "Do you want to take a break?" She was already at her limit. Chu Luiyue said slowly and firmly, "No need." Her voice was very weak, but it carried a hint of persistence. Then, she picked up the music score that had fallen to the ground. Even though her hands were trembling, she still held it tightly, her knuckles turning white. Jing's hand gently pressed on the strings of the zither. He smiled and said, "Actually, you don't have to force yourself like this. It was no big deal to rest for a while. Furthermore, your reading speed is already very fast." She had improved a lot and performed better than he had expected. Or should I help you adjust the flow of time? That way, you'll be able to relax a lot. Now that the flow of time was too fast, the pressure on her was also multiplied. As long as she slowed down, her condition would be much better. "Thank you, Senior Jing. You don't have to worry about me." Chu Luiyue shook her head again and rejected his suggestion. Now, she only hoped that she could integrate the music score as quickly as possible and then go out to meet Rong Xiu and the others, so that they would not be too worried. Although the process was torturous, she could still bear it. Jing stared at her for a while, then helplessly curled his lips and sighed softly. You're really stubborn. Not to mention other things, this kind of temperament was extremely rare. Such a person would do her best in everything. How could she not succeed? His fingertips strummed the strings, and the music started again. In an instant, the bloody scene of the battle appeared in her mind again. Suddenly, a thought flashed through her mind. These scenes did not seem to be illusory. In the dark and lonely space, Rong Xiu stood silently. He closed his eyes, covering his mesmerizing eyes. Then, the cluster of golden flames in his palm quickly spread around his body. In a short while, his entire body was completely enveloped by the flames. That incomparably noble face, under the illumination of the brilliant firelight, was suffused with a jade-like luster. A totem gradually appeared between his eyebrows. Holy, noble, and unattainable. At the same time, the figure in the huge mirror in front of him was also enveloped by the black flames. Powerful, domineering, and awe-inspiring. A totem gradually appeared between his eyebrows. However, that totem was completely different from the one between Rong Xiu's eyebrows outside the mirror. But this totem only flashed for a moment before it was enveloped by the surrounding black flames. Then, Rong Xiu stretched out his hand and reached for the mirror. Nanny only felt that her body was constantly falling. Other than the whistling of the wind, she could not hear anything else. After an unknown period of time, she finally fell to the ground. Bang! There was a muffled sound. The ground was hard, and she almost fractured her bones when she fell. Hiss! She sucked in a breath of cold air from the pain. But before she could finish gasping, a corner of crimson clothes entered her peripheral vision. She was shocked and hurriedly looked up. Not far in front of her, a piece of white bone was lying quietly on the ground. It was slender and smooth, stained with black and red blood, and looked like a human forearm bone. However, this was not the reason that truly shocked Nanny, but there was actually a translucent figure standing on that white bone. It was a man who looked to be in his 40s. He was thin and had an ordinary face. He was the kind of existence that no one would remember after a glance. However, when his gaze swept over, Nan-yi suddenly felt a chill all over her body. An indescribable cold fear suddenly rose from the bottom of her heart. With just one look, she was certain that this man was definitely not to be trifled with. "Why, you're the person who spoke to me just now?" Nanny asked nervously. The middle-aged man did not answer this meaningless question. He only sized her up and said indifferently, "Name?" Nanny was stunned for a moment before she realized that he was asking for her name. Seeing that the other party didn't seem to have any intention of attacking her, she said hesitantly, Nan-yi. You're from the Nan family?" The man looked enlightened. "No wonder you have such a treasure on you." Nanny heaved a sigh of relief when she heard that the other party knew about her family background. In this case, he should have some scruples and wouldn't attack casually, right? "Don't worry, since I promised to bring you out, I won't go back on my word." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1704. After all, Nanny was young and inexperienced, so all her thoughts were written on her face. Everything she was thinking about was easily seen through by the other party. Nanny pursed her lips. Although she didn't know the other party's identity, his words and actions were rather magnanimous. Especially when he spoke, his expression was calm, but it inexplicably made people feel like they were bathed in a spring breeze. It was very comfortable. She unconsciously let down her guard and nodded. Then, "Thank you very much, Senior. By the way, how should I address you?" The man said indifferently, "I've been trapped here for 1,000 years. It's no longer important to call me by my name." Nan-yi was shocked again. Trapped for 1,000 years. Wasn't a little too long ago? She looked up. Actually, she had many questions she wanted to ask the other party, such as his identity and background. Why was he trapped here, and why was he residing in a bone? But she didn't need to say anything. Judging from the other party's expression, she knew that he definitely wouldn't say anything. Then, "Senior, How did you know that I could help you out? She was actually asking how he knew that she had that short sword on her. She was really curious about this question. That short sword was the most precious treasure she had. The necklace around her neck looked like an ordinary piece of ruby jewelry, but in fact, it was an interspatial ring that his father had specially made for the short sword. There was only one thing in it. Her father had said that she absolutely couldn't use it unless it was a life-and-death situation. So all these years, she had never taken it out. However, this man had recognized her immediately. How could Nanny not be puzzled? She asked carefully, but the man didn't seem to take this matter to heart at all. He seemed to laugh and said indifferently, I've seen countless divine artifacts in my life. I've seen countless divine artifacts in my life. How could I not recognize yours? In other words, he didn't seem to think that the short sword in Nanny's hand was very precious. Nanny choked and felt a little angry and aggrieved. Their Nan family was one of the top existences in the divine ruins world. Even those first-rate families had to give them face. Something that they regarded as a treasure was naturally a real treasure. This man's tone was so arrogant that he was most likely bragging. But of course, she didn't dare to show her dissatisfaction and could only respond. It seemed that she wouldn't be able to get anything out of this man. She thought to herself, Go this way. The man suddenly spoke, startling Nan-ee. She looked in the direction that the man was pointing at and realized that there seemed to be a faint light coming from that direction. Previously, she was full of thoughts about this man and didn't notice this. Her heart skipped a beat. That's the exit. The man beside her. If it's really that easy, why would I be trapped here for over 1,000 years? Wasn't she a little? Nanny could hear the mockery in his words. Her face heated up and she felt very embarrassed. Simply speaking, this is a huge. There are countless paths that divide this place into countless spaces, but there is only one path that leads out of this place. He glanced at Nan-ee. You didn't come in alone, right? His status was not low, and his talent was not bad. Unfortunately, it was not enough in this place. The Nan family would never let her come alone. Nanny nodded hesitantly. Then, she suddenly raised her head and looked at the other party expectantly. Senior, my big brother, and the rest are here too. Can you help me find No? Before Nanny could finish speaking, the man interrupted her indifferently and gave a firm negative answer. Nanny choked. W.Y. I can give you a generous reward. As long as you are willing to help, we will definitely reward you greatly after we get out. The man glanced at her with undisguised sarcasm and arrogance. Do you know how much space there is here? Even if they came in with you, they aren't in the same place as you, right? Do you think it's so easy to find someone here? You have to know that even if they're next to you and are only separated by a wall, it's extremely difficult for you to see them. I promised to bring you out, but I didn't say that I would help others. The other party's tone was firm and cold. Nanny's heart, which was originally full of hope, gradually sank. If you still want to go out, follow behind me quietly for the rest of the time. Nanny's nails dug into her palms, and she lowered her eyes. I understand. Yi Zhao and the rest were still walking on the wasteland. Because he was worried about Dumpling and Chu Luiwei, he and Elder Yi were very fast. This made the people behind them suffer. Nan Yifan was still fine, but the two elders behind him were obviously starting to be unable to keep up. Their faces gradually turned pale, and their foreheads were already covered in fine beads of sweat. Nan Yifan couldn't help but frown when he saw this scene. He then glanced at Yi Zhao and Elder Yu. As expected of the pure, gold, heavenly phoenix. This kind of strength was truly peerless. The few of them were actually not weak, but in front of Yi Zhao and the rest, they were still not worth mentioning. The two of them didn't even have the slightest change in expression and looked extremely relaxed. Looking at them, the comparison was really tragic. Nan Yifan's mood became very complicated. As one of the two ancient divine beasts, the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan had always been very arrogant. As a clan leader, Yi Zhao was even more so. He had almost no contact with the human race for many years. When he first saw Yi Zhao and the rest, Nan Yifan was polite and respectful on the surface, but he was still a little unconvinced in his heart. But now, he finally understood that the other party did indeed have the right to be arrogant. It seemed that in the future, he had to be more careful when dealing with Yi Zhao and the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Elder Yi noticed the strangeness of Nan Yifan and the rest, but he only curled his lips and smiled playfully, not taking it to heart. As for the strength of these people, he had more or less guessed it at first glance. It was normal for them to be weak and unable to keep up. In the human race, these people, including Nan Yifan, might be considered top-notch in terms of talent and strength. But this was still not enough to enter their eyes. The Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan was an ancient divine beast born in the chaos. The power of their bloodline was almost invincible. How could ordinary humans compare to them? So what if they were strong venerables? They still couldn't even enter the gate of their Phoenix God Mountain. All these years, the only one who could make them look at them in a new light was that Shang Wanyu. Yi Zhao suddenly stopped. Elder Yi put away his thoughts. Clan leader, Yi Zhao raised his hand. They are over there. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 17:05. Elder Yi narrowed his eyes and looked in the direction Yi Zhao was pointing. He was slightly stunned. In the distance, in the vast wilderness, there were countless messy and broken tombstones. Even though there was still some distance between them, they could still clearly feel the dense and cold aura of suppression from where they were standing. Oppressive, heavy, majestic. The air was filled with a desolate and thick smell of blood. It was frightening. This is the tombs of the exalted gods. Elder Yi murmured. Clan leader, do you mean? Yi Zhao raised his chin. No, look again. Elder Yi was stunned for a moment before he looked even further into the distance. Only then did he see that there seemed to be an unusual black color at the point where the sky and the earth met. That's a wall. Elder Yi widened his eyes. Hearing his words, Nan Yifan and the others immediately looked in that direction. However, their eyesight was not as good as Elder Yi's. They could not compare to Yi Zhao's, so they could only see a black line. However, Nan Yifan's face was still filled with shock. There was indeed a wall in the Divine Ruins world. Rumor had it that it appeared in the earth-shattering battle tens of thousands of years ago. It was said that the wall contained endless power and could separate heaven and earth. All the cultivators who participated in the battle back then died, and countless treasures were destroyed. Only this wall was strong and sturdy and had been preserved. Before this, Nan Yifan had only heard of the existence of this wall in rumors. He had never seen it before. Therefore, when he saw it from afar, he could not hide his excitement. However, Yi Zhao's next sentence made his heart turn cold. They should be inside. The moment he said that, the surroundings fell silent. Inside? What inside? The few of them looked at each other blankly. They saw the confusion, suspicion, and disbelief in each other's eyes. Although Elder Yi was not as shocked as Nan Yifan and the others, he also frowned. You're saying they're inside that wall? Yi Zhao nodded. How is that possible? Nan Yifan finally had no one to stop him from speaking. Clan leader Yi Zhao, are you saying that they're behind that wall? How could a perfectly good wall contain people? Moreover, the reason why this wall was so famous was because it was exceptionally sturdy. Not only did it not collapse during the bloody battle back then, it even stood tenaciously between heaven and earth after experiencing tens of thousands of years of wind, frost, and rain. It would be difficult for an average person to even leave a hole in the wall, let alone others. Wasn't this too strange? Yi Zhao didn't even look at him, as if he hadn't heard his question at all. He walked straight to the wall. Elder Yi immediately followed after him. However, the smile on his face had already disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by a rare, solemn, and serious expression. Nan Yifan didn't get an answer, but he didn't have time to feel aggrieved. This was because he could tell that Yi Zhao and Yu Yuehan seemed to be a little nervous. I'm afraid things are going to get troublesome. Nan Yifan's heart also hung in the air. If the person Yi Zhao and the others were looking for was trapped in that wall, then would Yi and the others also? This thought made him feel a strong sense of uneasiness. He took a deep breath and waved at them. "Follow me." The tombs of the exalted god were silent. Yizhao and the others passed through in silence. The process was long and torturous. Moreover, the closer they got, the more they could feel the astonishing pressure and evil aura. The tombs of the exalted god should be in front. "Elder," EU whispered. The wall was in the tombs of the exalted god. The further they went, the closer they got to the wall. Naturally, they could see it more clearly. Nan Yifan gritted his teeth and walked, staring straight at the black wall in front of him that was getting clearer. The wall was extremely tall and stood there quietly. He couldn't see the end of it on either side. He didn't know how long this wall was. Why hadn't he seen it before when he came here? Plop! A muffled voice came from behind. Nan Yifan turned around to look. One of the elders who came with him fell to the ground with a pale face. "Ma, Patriarch, I..." Before he could finish his sentence, his chest shook and he spat out a mouthful of blood. The bloodstains were dark red, making his face look even more haggard and miserable. Nan Yifan's face darkened. An elder next to him couldn't help but say, "Patriarch, the evil aura on the wall is too terrifying. I'm afraid Elder Jinming can't hold on. And I'm afraid the rest of us will also." This wasn't an insult, but it was the truth. They knew each other's strength the best. They had already come this far, and no one wanted to stop here. If it wasn't for the fact that they had no other choice, they wouldn't have. Nan Yifan closed his eyes and said, "You and Elder Jinming stay here and wait. Don't go any further." The road ahead was dangerous, and he couldn't gamble with his elder's life. The two elders were hesitant at first, but in the end, they chose to nod and agree. They knew that they were at the end of their rope. If they forced themselves to follow, they would only be a burden. "Patriarch, you must be careful." Nan Yifan didn't delay for too long. He gave a few words of advice and turned to leave, continuing to follow Yi Zhao and Elder Jinming. They walked forward for a while more before finally arriving in front of the wall. Yi Zhao stopped in his tracks and stared fixedly ahead with a deep gaze. Elder Yi frowned. The situation was worse than he had expected. When Nan Yifan caught up, he immediately noticed the low pressure around the two. His heart sank as well. After waiting for a while, seeing that Yi Zhao and Elder Jinming still had no intention of speaking or taking action, Nan Yifan finally spoke hesitantly. "Patriarch Yi Zhao, are you sure that the person you're looking for is inside?" Elder Yi put his hands behind his back and said indifferently, "Patriarch Nan, your daughter and the others should be inside too." Nan Yifan was shocked. How did you? This wall can isolate all auras. Anyone who enters will lose contact with the outside world." A look of horror flashed across Nan Yifan's eyes. He really didn't know about this. He looked at the black wall in front of him again. It was tall, heavy, and majestic. After weathering the wind and frost, the wall was mottled, and the biting, cold, murderous aura kept gushing out from it. Almost unbearable. They were still outside, but it was already so unbearable. If they really entered, wouldn't it be even more dangerous? "Then we have to get them out quickly," Nan Yifan said nervously. Elder Yu suddenly laughed, but there wasn't any smile on his face. He turned his head and glanced at Nan Yifan. "Patriarch Nan, do you know how many people have been trapped here for tens of thousands of years?" Nan Yifan looked at him, and a strong sense of uneasiness suddenly surged in his heart. Elder EU said indifferently, "Not a single one." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1706. Not a single one. Nan Yifan's eyes widened. Didn't that mean that everyone who entered this place would die with no chance of survival? Then Yu Xing, Yi, and the others. Elder EU, is what you said true? Nan Yifan had been through a lot in his life and was usually unperturbed even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him. However, when he heard this, he panicked. It was very likely that his only two closest bloodlines were inside. If they really could never come out, then Nan Yifan did not dare to continue thinking. He took a step forward and asked anxiously, "Clan leader Yi Zhao, you must have a way, right?" If the people Yi Zhao was looking for were inside, he would definitely think of a way to bring them out. Perhaps he could also bring you Xing, Yi, and the others. Step back, Yi Zhao suddenly said. Nan Yifan hurriedly did as he was told and looked at Yi Zhao expectantly. Elder Yi wanted to say something, but hesitated. In the end, he did not say anything and took a few steps back. Yi Zhao raised his head and looked in front of him. Chi! A cluster of crimson gold flames suddenly appeared in his palm. A terrifying aura instantly descended upon the place. The temperature of the surrounding space also rose rapidly with the appearance of this flame. Nan Yifan's Adam's apple bobbed, and his throat went dry. However, he did not dare to blink for fear that he would miss something. At the same time, he was also secretly shocked. Yi Zhao's attack was indeed extraordinary. His true realm and strength were obviously more shocking than the rumors. This also made Nan Yifan feel slightly more at ease. Yi Zhao was so powerful. Perhaps he could create a miracle buzz. The moment Yi Zhao attacked, the black wall in front of him immediately reacted. With this buzzing sound, a huge, strange totem gradually gathered on the wall and appeared in front of Yi Zhao and the others. Whose totem is this? Why haven't I seen it before? An elder behind Nan Yifan could not help but murmur curiously. A totem that could appear here was obviously not ordinary. However, they all recognized the totem of the famous clans and sects in the world of divine ruins. None of them matched this one. Another elder pondered for a moment and guessed uncertainly. Perhaps it's the totem of some clan or sect that participated in that shocking battle tens of thousands of years ago. This was the most likely guess. Since that battle, countless experts had fallen, and even their families and sects had vanished without a trace in the long river of time. At that time, there weren't many forces that managed to survive. Things like totems were naturally even more obscure. Nan Yifan did not particularly care about this totem. All his attention was now on Yi. Now, he really was putting all his hope in Yi. As long as Yu Xing and Yi could come out safely, everything else. Crack! A faint sound came from the wall. Nan Yifan and the others perked up. Is it going to open? But their expectant faces looked as the huge totem on the black wall suddenly started to rotate slowly. That was where the sound came from. Almost at the same time, the flame in Yi Zhao's palm suddenly extinguished. Then a gust of wind swept out. Yi Zhao was shocked, and his aura rose rapidly. In an instant, a gust of wind swept out. Dust flew everywhere. A tyrannical and terrifying force swept over. Yi Zhao was Yi Zhao after all. In the end, he still managed to stabilize his body in this terrifying storm. However, the ground beneath his feet had already cracked open several times. His feet had sunk half an inch into the ground. Elder EU, who was at the back, suffered less of the impact, but he also managed to stand still in his position with difficulty. Nan Yifan and the rest were not in such a good situation. Their strength was inferior to Elder EU's to begin with. Furthermore, they were not completely prepared when the accident occurred. Thus, their figures were sent flying just like that. However, they were all human powerhouses with rich combat experience after all. After suffering the initial loss, they reacted in time and tried their best to stabilize their bodies. But at this time, they had already retreated a distance away from the Black Wall. But this was not the most worrisome thing, because Yi Zhao's situation did not look good. Although he was still standing on the spot and refused to retreat, as the totem on the Black Wall slowly rotated, the power erupting from it became more and more terrifying. Crack! The cracks in the ground under Yi Zhao's feet began to spread further away. Half of Nan Yifan's heart turned cold. Yi Zhao was the patriarch of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. If even he couldn't do it, then wouldn't the people trapped inside really be hopeless? Nan Yi walked in the dark and winding space. 5 steps in front of her, a translucent figure was walking forward unhurriedly. The surroundings were deathly silent, and she could only hear her own footsteps. The man in front didn't speak, and she didn't dare to ask anything. She could only follow behind carefully. Fortunately, this man seemed to really know the way out. Along the way, their progress was very smooth. Not only did they not encounter any more danger, but the faintly discernible light in front of them seemed to be getting clearer and clearer. This gave Nanny hope. Perhaps following this man would really be able to get out of here. Although she was also very worried about Big Brother and the rest, she could only care about herself now. After thinking about it, she finally decided to think of a way after getting out of here. Uncle Luo Yin was nowhere to be seen here, and his contact with her father had been cut off. She couldn't even ask for help. Nanny was thinking about it when she suddenly realized that the man in front of her had stopped. She thought that he wanted to confirm the direction, so she obediently stopped in her tracks and waited obediently. However, after a while, the person in front still didn't move. Nanny opened her mouth, wanting to ask about it. However, the sound of footsteps suddenly fell into her ears. There was someone. Nanny's heart skipped a beat, and she hurriedly looked over. On the side, a figure was slowly walking out from the darkness. Although the surroundings were dark, when that person walked closer, she could still vaguely see his appearance. As that person continued to approach, she could clearly feel that the surrounding atmosphere was rapidly becoming stiff and cold. The air seemed to be freezing inch by inch. A heavy and oppressive aura quickly spread. When she saw that person's face clearly, Nan-yi covered her mouth with one hand. At the same time, her eyes widened in shock. How could it be? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1707. What a coincidence. That person stood rooted to the ground and said indifferently, I didn't expect to meet you here. Nanny's heart seemed to be gripped tightly by something. She was about to speak when she suddenly heard the man in front of her laugh and say, It's a coincidence. You actually came here one day. Nanny was stunned. Only then did she realize that the other party's words were not meant for her. She furrowed her brows and glanced at the two of them with confusion and suspicion. They knew each other. That shouldn't be the case. She recognized the man in front of her. He was with Shang Wanyu back then. He seemed to be some relative of Shang Wanyu. Nan-yi wasn't shocked that he would appear here. At that time, everyone had been swallowed and entered this place. It was at most an accident and coincidence that they had met. But how did he know this man who was with her? The latter had been locked up here for 1,000 years. The man in front of her continued. Actually, what surprised me even more is that you're still alive. His voice sounded very calm at first, but if one thought about it carefully, they would realize that he seemed to be suppressing something. Nanny couldn't describe this feeling. Shangwan Jing smiled as well. I should be the one saying this to you. You're the one who's truly tough. You've been trapped here for so long, but you're still struggling at death's door. As soon as he finished speaking, Nanny suddenly felt a strong, murderous intent. But this murderous intent only flashed past. By the time Nan-yi came to her senses, the cold and sinister feeling had already disappeared. It was as if everything was just her imagination. Shangwan Jing's gaze swept past Nan-yi. His eyes seemed to have seen through everything. Looks like you helped him. Nan-yi, I'm afraid you still don't know what kind of person you helped, right? Nan-yi inexplicably felt guilty and nervous. She subconsciously glanced at the man in front of her. Why does words sound so strange? Could it be that this man's identity was extraordinary, or was there something fishy? Shangwan Jing, the feud between us has already been settled back then. Let's mind our own business now. You can do whatever you want, but don't stop me from leaving. Otherwise, I won't be polite. This was the first time Nan-yi had heard such threatening words from the man in front of her. Shangwan Jing laughed out loud, as if he had heard a joke. After a long while, he said, You Hongshan, what else can you do to me? Based on the fact that you don't even have a physical body and are just a remnant soul? How laughable. Back then, Yu Hongshan's strength had already been inferior to his, and he had only managed to fight him to a draw by relying on various schemes and tricks. After that fierce battle, Shangwan Jing was wounded and went to the north of the untainted wilderness. Yu Hongshan, on the other hand, was swallowed into the space of the Black Wall and could not come out for 1,000 years. In fact, neither of them had expected the other to be able to survive until now. Even more so, they didn't expect to meet each other here. Yu Hongshan's aura surged. Clearly, he was enraged. His voice was cold. Shangwan Jing, do you think I'm still the old me? As soon as he finished speaking, a majestic aura burst out from his body. Shangwan Jing narrowed his eyes and smiled. I was wondering why you were so arrogant. It turns out that you've broken through to become a god. This was indeed rare. It was almost impossible to break through from a high god to a god without a physical body. No wonder he was so arrogant. It was obvious that Yu Hongshan had put in a lot of effort in this aspect over the past 1,000 years. Or perhaps he had encountered some fortuitous opportunity here. However, Shangwan Jing didn't care. His feet slightly staggered, and the aura on his body rapidly became dangerous. In that case, I'll have a good fight with you. Seeing that Shangwan Jing was really going to fight here, Yu Hongshan's face twisted for a moment. He had only said those words to intimidate Shangwan Jing. He didn't really want to fight him. He wasn't afraid of Shangwan Jing. What he wanted to do the most right now was to get out of here. It wouldn't be too late to fight after he got out. However, Shangwan Jing didn't seem to have that intention. Yu Hongshan suppressed his anger and said coldly, Shangwan Jing, you've been here for a while. Shangwan Jing, you've been here for a while. You should be aware of the danger here. If you really want to fight, sure. We'll talk after we get out. If you want to die here, don't drag others down with you. Shangwan Jing narrowed his eyes. Although he didn't really believe Yu Hongshan's words, he did realize that there was something strange about this place along the way. Yu and the others must have been forcefully devoured and brought here. Unfortunately, he couldn't find them even after searching for a long time. Suddenly, his expression changed slightly as he looked Yu Hongshan up and down. Do you know how to get out? Yu Hongshan didn't say anything. He had been trapped here for 1,000 years. Although he hadn't been able to leave that place, he still had a good understanding of this place. Of course, he knew how to get out. Otherwise, he wouldn't have tried so hard to get Nanny to help him. He was silent for a long time before saying, as long as you promise that you won't fight before we get out, I can take you out of here. Nanny was shocked. Senior, how can I do that? This Shangwan Jing was in cahoots with Shangwan Yu and the others. She couldn't wait for him to stay here forever and die here. How could she take him out? Yu Hongshan turned his head halfway and looked at her with an extremely cold gaze. Shut up if you don't want to die. Nanny was stunned by the reprimand. However, due to the other party's pressure, she didn't dare to make a fuss. She could only grit her teeth and swallow the rest of her words. She still had to get out. After leaving this place, she wouldn't have to be threatened by these people anymore. Yu Hongshan looked at Shangwan Jing again, waiting for his answer. Shangwan Jing crossed his arms and frowned, as if he was deep in thought. But Yu Hongshan wasn't in a hurry at all. As long as there was nothing wrong with Shangwan Jing's brain, he would definitely agree to his suggestion. After a moment, Shangwan Jing finally spoke. Since you know how to get out, Yu Hongshan waited calmly. Then, you definitely know how to find the others? Yu Hongshan's expression froze when he heard this. He said gloomily, Shangwan Jing, what do you mean? Shangwan Jing laughed. Nothing much. I just hope that you can help me find you and the others. Then we can go out together. After all, you and I are acquaintances. You won't be unwilling to help me with such a small favor, right? Shangwan Jing. Yu Hongshan suddenly raised his voice. Shangwan Jing's smile didn't change as he raised his hand. Please. Chu Luiyue was still focused on the zither score at her hand. She didn't remember how much she had read, but the number of zither scores hanging around her had obviously decreased by a lot. And during this process, she read faster and faster. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1708. Chu Liwei had listened to that too many times. She was extremely intelligent. She could remember almost everything that she had seen or heard. But because this was not an ordinary score, she still could not memorize it completely even though she had listened to it many times. Every syllable seemed to be wonderful and bouncing in her ears. The sound of the zither brushed past her ears and passed through her mind, but it only left behind a very faint trace. So, Chu Luiyue could only memorize it bit by bit, and then compare it with the score in her hands to distinguish the real from the fake. She did not know if it was because she had gotten used to it, but she gradually became numb to the pain all over her body. This allowed her to divert more energy to focus on the score. Jing's hands paused, and he tilted his head slightly. As far as his eyes could see, it was a thick black. So noisy, he muttered in a low voice, and there was a trace of impatience in his tone. He had never been a patient person, but most of the time, he was too lazy to care, so he turned a blind eye and let it pass. But now was not the time. He had waited for so long, and finally Chu Luiyue came. It was not easy to get his cultivation on the right track. How could he be disturbed? His well-defined fingers moved gently, and a light blade flew out in an instant. And he did all this silently. Chu Luiyue, who was focused on the score, did not notice. Boom! With a violent sound, a ball of fire suddenly exploded in front of Yi Zhao. He tipped his toes and quickly retreated. Violent energy swept out in all directions, and there were even scorch marks on the ground. Nan Yifan and the others retreated again. After a while, the force finally subsided. Smoke and dust filled the air, and there was still the smell of something burning in the air. Hot and anxious, Nan Yifan let go of his hand, and his palm was already wet with sweat. Just now it was too scary. Yi Zhao and the force of the Black Wall were fighting head-on, and the two sides were fighting fiercely. Just by standing there, they could feel the terrible heat that would rush toward them in the next second. If it were them, they would not even be able to hold on for a third of the time. Patriarch, how are you? Elder Yu quickly rushed to Yi Zhao's side, a rare look of nervousness on his face. Yi Zhao shook his head. I'm fine, but this wall has been completely sealed off by an extremely ferocious force. I'm afraid it will be difficult to force our way in from the outside. Elder Yu had actually already expected this outcome. However, when he saw Yi Zhao's grave expression, his heart unconsciously sank. If even the Patriarch had said so, if that was the case, then there was really no way out of this matter. But Dumpling and the others were still inside. They couldn't just let it go like this, could they? Yi Zhao was silent for a moment. He raised his eyes to look at the black wall, and there seemed to be waves surging in his eyes. After a long while, he said, Let's wait and see. Elder Yu's lips moved. Yes. Nanny Fan and the others also heard this and couldn't help looking at each other. If even Yi Zhao and the others couldn't do anything, then wouldn't it be even more hopeless for them? Nanny Fan clenched his fists tightly, and his brows furrowed. He was really worried and nervous. After all, Nan Yuxing and Nan Yi were both inside. If something really happened, Patriarch, why don't we wait for a while? An elder beside him advised in a low voice. In the current situation, it was definitely impossible to force it. Since Yi Zhao and the others had decided to wait, then they didn't seem to have a better idea. Nanny Fan took out a jade pendant. 4 light spots were still floating gently in it. However, one of them had obviously become much dimmer. That was Elder by Tong. Nanny Fan kept the jade pendant and stared at the black wall in front of him. Wait, he waved at the two of them. You guys should also rest for a while and adjust. After rushing all the way here, all of them were exhausted, and they hadn't encountered any trouble. If they encountered any danger again, it would be difficult for them to save their own lives. The 2 elders nodded in agreement. Nanny Fan closed his eyes and muttered in a low voice. The murderous aura in the god-slaying tomb seems to be getting stronger. He had never encountered such a situation when he came here before. He didn't know what was going on. Just as he turned around and was about to adjust his breathing, a strange fluctuation suddenly came from the black wall. Buzz! Everyone present quickly looked up. They saw the light on the wall rotating. The huge totem was even more dazzling. Then, a a figure suddenly fell out of it. Nanny Fan looked over and was pleasantly surprised. Who else could it be but his precious daughter, Nan Ee? Nan Ee was still in a daze, but when she heard this voice, she was shocked and subconsciously looked over. Father. Nan Ee widened her eyes in disbelief. Nan Yifan, however, had already rushed over. How are you? He asked as he pulled Nan Ee. Father. Hiss. Nan Ee cried out in pain. Nan Yifan hurriedly let go of her, only to see that there was a long scratch on her arm. Her flesh and blood had already stained half of her sleeve red. His heart suddenly tightened, and he hurriedly sized up Nan Ee's entire body. Only then did he realize that there were countless similar wounds on her body. It was not an exaggeration to say that she was covered in wounds. What made Nanny Fan even more frightened was that Nan Ee's breathing was very weak and her face was extremely pale. She was obviously seriously injured. Nan Fan's heart ached, and he didn't know where to start. Why are you like this? What exactly did she encounter? At this time, the two elders behind him had also rushed over. They were calmer than Nan Fan. Master, let's treat Second Miss first. One of the elders reminded him. Nan Fan came to his senses and hurriedly took out a green jade bottle. He poured out a pill and carefully fed it to Nan Ee. This is a golden origin pill. Take it quickly. From the sound of the jade bottle, there should be a few more pills in it. The golden origin pill was a top-notch pill that only a supremacy doctor could refine. It had a miraculous effect on stopping bleeding, treating injuries, and recovering the body. Even for many first-rate aristocratic families, this thing was very precious, but in Nan Yifan's place, it was easily a bottle. It was obvious that he was rich. Nan Ee swallowed the golden origin pill and felt a warm energy surge through her body. Her pale face also had a hint of rosy color. Only then did Nan Yifan carefully help her up. What exactly is going on? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1709. Nan Yifan asked anxiously. Nanny took a deep breath, but she didn't answer his question immediately. Instead, she turned around first. After her, there was no one else. Was she the only one who came out? Seeing that she didn't answer, Nan Yifan was a little anxious. Only then did Nan retract her gaze. Everything that happened just now quickly flashed through her mind. After Shangwan Jing said that, Yu Hongshan was annoyed. As if knowing that there was no need to continue the discussion, Yu Hongshan finally chose to make a move. The two of them started fighting just like that. Although Nan had tried her best to avoid them, that place was narrow and the two of them were powerful. In the fierce battle, she was inevitably affected. Some of the injuries on her body were from that time. But this wasn't fatal. After all, she was still a high god and had treasures to protect herself. But unexpectedly, not long after, the surrounding space began to distort, and at the same time, countless light blades flew over from all directions. Her little bit of strength was simply not enough at this time. She only felt as if her body had been ruthlessly crushed by an invisible force, and her bones and tendons were almost shattered, and those light blades, one after another, ruthlessly scraped against her body. Countless ghastly scars were left behind. She originally thought that she was going to die, but who knew that she actually came out alive? Unfortunately, in the end, her mind was in a mess and she couldn't remember anything. He couldn't even remember how he got out of there. As for Yu Hongshan and Shangwan Jing, she seemed to have lost contact with them halfway, so she naturally didn't know their whereabouts at this time. Nanny sorted out everything in her mind before she suppressed her sobs and said, "What's wrong?" "Father, thought that I would never see you again." The Nan family followed the rules. When there were other people around, she basically called Nan Yifan father or the head of the family. At this moment, she was calling him father with red eyes. It was obvious that she had suffered a great shock and grievance. Nan Yifan's heart skipped a beat when he heard that, and his heart ached even more. Don't worry. You're safe now. With me around, I won't let you fall into danger again. I and the elders will definitely protect you well. Nanny sobbed for a while before she gradually calmed down under Nan Yifun's comfort. Seeing that she had finally stopped crying and her body seemed to be getting better, Nan Yifun couldn't help but ask, You're out. We're your brothers. Nanny wiped her tears and said in a hoarse voice, Earlier, Big Brother, 2 elders, and I were all sucked into that black wall. But after we went in, we split up. I looked for them for a long time, but I couldn't find them. As she spoke, her eyes filled with tears again, making Nan Yifun's heart ache even more. It's all because of Yi's incompetence. It's all Yi's fault. If it wasn't for accompanying me, Big Brother and the others wouldn't have encountered such danger. As Nan Yi spoke, she raised her hand to hit herself. Nan Yifun hurriedly stopped him. What nonsense! How can I blame you for this? If you want to blame someone, it should be your father. In the end, if he hadn't forced them to come over, how could this have happened? He had long regretted it. When she heard Nanny's words, she felt as if thousands of arrows had pierced her heart. Fortunately, she was lucky enough to survive. If something had really happened, Nan Yifun didn't dare to think about how he would face all of this. All right, don't worry. Look, you've already come out. Maybe Yuxing and the others will come out safely in a while. Nan Yifun really held onto this hope in his heart. Previously, Elder Yu had said that no one had ever been able to come out of this black wall. But now, wasn't Yi here perfectly fine? Even though she was seriously injured, she still managed to survive. Nan Yifun was actually quite happy. However, Nan Yi's expression wasn't that relaxed. She bit her lip. She knew what the situation inside was like. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was surrounded by danger. Nan Yifun was very optimistic, but she didn't dare to think about it. If she wanted to come out alive under such circumstances, it was purely based on luck. Didn't he see that Yu Hongshan and Shang Wanjing were nowhere to be seen? She stretched out her hand and grabbed Nan Yifun's sleeve tightly, gritting her teeth. She gritted her teeth and said, Father, actually, all of this has something to do with Shang Wanyu. Nan Yifun was stunned. Shang Wanyu? Who is that? He paused for a moment and frowned. But this name sounds a little familiar. He should have heard of this name before, but he suddenly couldn't remember it at this moment. Nanny's knuckles turned white. Where's she now? A cold, indifferent, and oppressive voice suddenly interrupted her words. Nanny couldn't help but tremble when she heard the voice. Only then did she look in the direction of the voice. 2 men were standing not far away from them. The one who spoke was the one in front. He was burly and imposing. At this moment, his deep eyes were staring intently at her. Nan Yi immediately became nervous and subconsciously looked at Nan Yifun. Father, they are, Nan Yifun hurriedly said, Oh, right. I almost forgot to introduce you. This is clan leader Yi Zhao of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Standing behind him is Elder Yu. Why aren't you bowing? Nanny was already shocked when she heard the words Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix. When she found out the true identity of the 2 people in front of her, she opened her mouth in shock and couldn't come back to her senses for a long time. Clan leader? This was a top-notch big shot that only existed in rumors. It was said that even venerables were rejected when they went to seek an audience. Arrogant, domineering, and domineering. This was the impression that most cultivators in the Divine Ruins world had of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. And as the clan leader, Yi Zhao was even more so. Nanny had never expected that she would meet such a person here. No wonder even father was so polite. Nanny hurriedly bowed. Junior Nanny greets. Let me ask you, where's the person you mentioned just now? Yi Zhao couldn't be bothered to beat around the bush with her and went straight to the point. Nanny was stunned for a moment before she quickly glanced at Yi Zhao. His expression didn't look good, but he obviously knew Shang Wanyu. That's right. Shang Wanyu had contracted a Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix. As the clan leader, how could Yi Zhao not know about it? He was most likely here to find trouble with Shang Wanyu, to contract a Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix. He must be tired of living. Look, even their clan leader was alarmed. At this thought, Nanny's thoughts turned, and she asked, Clan leader Yi Zhao, are you looking for that B*TCH2? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 17:10. As soon as she said that, Elder EU's eyes turned cold. This young lady looked weak, but he didn't expect her to be so rude. She actually called Shangguan Yu B*TCH directly. Just as he was about to reprimand him, Yi Zhao suddenly glanced at him without batting an eyelid and stopped him. Elder EU choked, and his Adam's apple bobbed a few times. In the end, he swallowed his words. The undercurrent between the two of them was very subtle, and Nan Yi didn't notice it. However, Nan Yifan saw all of this. He couldn't understand Yi Zhao and Nan Yifan's expressions, but when he thought of their previous reactions, he couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. Weren't they here to look for their clansmen? Why did they suddenly say that they were looking for Shangguan Yu now? He didn't know what Shangguan Yu's relationship with them, but it was a little rash for Nan Yi to speak like this. He slightly emphasized his tone, hinting at a reminder. Nan Yi glanced at him, but didn't take his warning to heart. It seemed that father still didn't know that Shangguan Yu had contracted a crimson gold sky phoenix, right? Father, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. She carelessly gave him a word of advice before turning her head away. Nan Yifan wanted to say something, but seeing the subtle atmosphere, he shut his mouth in the end. Yi Zhao looked at Nan Yi from head to toe. His gaze was substantial and carried a heavy pressure. Nan Yi couldn't help but feel timid. Just when she almost couldn't take it anymore, Yi Zhao finally retracted his gaze. Only then did Nan Yi feel relieved. That's right. Yi Zhao was still expressionless and unfathomable. I'm indeed looking for her. Hearing his affirmative answer, Nan Yi was even more convinced of her previous guess. He must have found out about that contracted fiend, so he came all the way here. For a moment, Nan Yi felt smug and regretful. She was smug because after offending the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, Shangguan Yu was definitely doomed. Unfortunately, she seemed to still be trapped in that black wall until now, and no one knew if she was dead or alive. If Shangguan Yu was already dead inside, wouldn't she not be able to see her being tortured? She felt that it was a pity. She sighed and said, I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. The only thing I can be sure of now is that she's still there. But I don't know if she's alive or dead, or if she can come out in the end. Yi Zhao furrowed his brows quickly. Actually, this result was within his expectations. Previously, you said that everything was Shangguan Yu's fault? What's going on? Tell me in detail. Yi Zhao's tone was calm and indifferent, yet it was noble and arrogant, and it caused others to unconsciously feel reverence and submission. Nanny loosened and tightened her grip. This matter, we have to start from a few days ago. After that, Nanny told him everything that had happened over the past few days. Of course, she ignored the few times she provoked them and took the initiative to find trouble with them. She emphasized how Shangguan Yu was rude and attacked them forcefully. The most important thing was that Shangguan Yu tried to kill her, but in the end, everyone was swallowed by the Black Wall. According to her, everything seemed to be caused by Shangguan Yu. From the beginning to the end, she didn't even mention Rongxiu's name. When outsiders heard this, they would naturally think that Shangguan Yu was an arrogant, domineering, unreasonable, selfish, and ruthless person. She was also the one who put everyone in a life-and-death situation. Elder EU couldn't continue listening after hearing a few sentences. It wasn't like he hadn't interacted with that girl before. Nanny's words were obviously not trustworthy. He didn't know how Shangguan Yu had offended her. She was actually trying so hard to smear their name. It was as if she couldn't wait to kill them forever. Could it be that it was just because they were all swallowed by the Black Wall? That's it. After Nanny finished speaking, she glanced at Yi Zhao carefully. Unfortunately, Yi Zhao's expression didn't change. Nan Yi couldn't guess what he was thinking at this time. On the other hand, Nan Yifan and the others were shocked by her words. Yi, you're saying that Shangguan Yu contracted a crimson gold heavenly phoenix? Nanny nodded. I don't know what method Shangwan you used. And that crimson gold heavenly phoenix is very obedient to her. Nen Yifan frowned. Since it's a contracted divine beast, it's normal. No wonder Nanny dared to say so earlier. There was such a shocking secret behind it. The crimson gold heavenly phoenix was an ancient divine beast and had always been extremely arrogant. They didn't even bother to interact with humans, let alone contract. This was undoubtedly a stain on their entire race. It was no wonder that Yi Zhao would take action personally. He was so nervous previously because he was looking for the contracted crimson gold heavenly phoenix. But Nanny suddenly thought of something and spoke hesitantly. There seems to be something wrong with that crimson gold heavenly phoenix. She can already transform into a human form, but she looks only 3 or 4 years old. Oh, Nan Yifan couldn't help but be shocked. The Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan could only transform into a human form after reaching adulthood, right? How could such a situation happen? In that case, that Shangwan Yu did use some special method? He was puzzled and looked at Yi Zhao and Elder Yu inquisitively. Unfortunately, the other party was more thoughtful and unpredictable than him. Nan Yifan couldn't tell what they were thinking at this time. How did you come out? Yi Zhao suddenly asked. Nanny had already thought of an answer, but there was still some panic and fear on her face. At that time, I was walking inside when I suddenly felt the surrounding space start to squeeze crazily. After some time, a strong force came. When I opened my eyes again, I found that I was already out. In other words, she didn't know what was going on either. Yourself? Elder EU, who had been silent all this time, spoke. Nanny hesitated for a moment. Yes. Elder EU smiled meaningfully. That second miss, Nan, is really amazing. She can actually walk around freely in there with the strength of a transcendent god. As far as I know, it seems to be quite dangerous inside, right? If second miss Nan encountered that situation, then the others should be the same. But now, only second miss Nan came out alone. She is really amazing. Nanny suddenly felt that something was wrong, but she couldn't tell exactly what was wrong. She could only smile awkwardly. Actually, I was just a little lucky, Buzz. A roar came from the black wall again. Everyone looked up and saw another figure falling out of the hole. Nanny's heart instantly jumped to her throat. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 17:11. That person looked up. A face full of bloodstains entered everyone's eyes. However, Nan Yi's heart instantly calmed down. Yuxing, Nan Yifan, was the first to react. He shouted and immediately rushed over to help him up. Not only was Nan Yuxing's face covered in blood, but his clothes were also soaked in blood. His eyes were tightly shut, and his breathing was weak. It was obvious that he had fainted. The thick smell of blood covered the sky and shrouded the earth. Nan Yifan was extremely anxious. Yuxing, wake up. Nan Yuxing's eyelids seemed to move, but he still couldn't open his eyes. Nan Yi and the two elders also rushed over at this time. Patriarch, please allow me to take eldest young master's pulse first. One of the elders said respectfully. Nan Yifan woke up and hurriedly stepped aside. Yes. Jin He, you do it. Elder Jin, he stepped forward and placed his fingers on Nan Yuxing's wrist. After a moment, his expression suddenly changed. A strong sense of uneasiness surged in Nan Yifan's heart. Jin He, how is it? Elder Jin, he seemed to be in disbelief as he took the pulse again. However, the result was the same this time. He was silent for a while before he retracted his hand. He sighed and cupped his hands at Nan Yifan. Patriarch, eldest young master's pearl of essence has shattered. What? Nan Yifan's mind went blank, and his figure suddenly staggered. Father. Nanny hurriedly went forward to support him and couldn't help but look at Elder Jin He. Eldest brother is extremely powerful. How could his pearl of essence have shattered? Elder Jin He, are you sure you're not mistaken? Elder Jin, he said helplessly. If Patriarch and Second Miss don't believe me, You can check it yourself. Genie didn't dare to say such things. Everyone knew that Nan Yuxing was the next patriarch of the Nan family. The shattering of his pearl of essence meant that he would be a cripple from now on. Then, he would definitely not be able to become the patriarch in this life. If he hadn't confirmed it repeatedly, Elder Jean, he wouldn't have dared to say this. Nan Yi was speechless. Her chest seemed to be blocked by something, and she felt suffocated. She turned her neck stiffly and looked at Nan Yuxing. At this moment, Nan Yuxing finally woke up. Big brother. Nan Yi pounced over. Nan Yuxing's vision was still blurry, but he no longer cared. He ignored Nan Yi and looked at Elder Jean, he with a dazed expression as he asked, "What's wrong? What you said just now, is it true?" In fact, he had been awake for a long time, but he couldn't open his eyes. However, he could hear everything around him clearly. Naturally, Elder Jean, his words were included as well. Elder Jean, he looked away and sighed. "Whether it's true or not, eldest young master, shouldn't you know best?" That was his core of essence. It was the source of his cultivation. Now that his origin core had shattered, all of the origin power in his body was rapidly escaping out of his body. How could he not feel it? Nan Yuxing's face was expressionless. After a long while, the corners of his mouth twitched with difficulty. That's true. In fact, he had felt it long ago, but he still didn't dare to believe it. From the moment he was born, he was a proud son of heaven. Who would have thought that one day his core of essence would shatter and he would become a cripple? To him, Nan Yifan and Nan Yi, who were present, this was undoubtedly a bolt from the blue. "Big brother." Nan Yi hugged him and cried. However, Nan Yuxing didn't have any reaction. He stared blankly at the void for a long time before he closed his eyes. He originally thought that he would die in there, but who knew that coming out would be even worse than death? Nan Yifan clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white and the veins on his forehead bulged. "Jean He, help him deal with his injuries first." Nan Yifan looked calm and composed, but his voice was already hoarse. He had high hopes for Nan Yuxing, and this was undoubtedly a wake-up call. However, he definitely couldn't break down in front of so many people. He couldn't even show too much abnormality. Elder Jean, he responded and began to treat Nan Yuxing's injuries. His condition was much more serious than Nan Yi's. In addition to external injuries, internal injuries were even more difficult to treat. His core of essence had shattered. It was really fortunate that he was able to survive. Of course, Nan Yuxing obviously didn't want this fortune himself. He closed his eyes, and his face was ashen. It was obvious that he no longer had any motivation to live. Elder Jean, he was a little anxious and whispered to Nan Yi, "Second miss, eldest young master has no intention of living. I'm afraid it won't be good if this continues." Nan Yi wiped away her tears. Actually, if she was Big Brother, she probably didn't want to live anymore. But she couldn't just watch Big Brother die like this. She took a deep breath and leaned closer. "Big Brother, we haven't taken revenge yet. You must persevere. Don't you want to see what will happen to that B*TCH who reduced us to such a state?" Nanny gritted her teeth as she said these words. Every word carried a deep hatred and resentment that couldn't be dispelled. She blamed all of this on that one person. At the same time, she pointed all the spearheads at that person. Finally, those words managed to move Nan Yuxing. With great difficulty, he slowly opened his eyes. His originally lifeless and despairing eyes were gradually filled with deep hatred. That's right. All of this was that Shang Yu's fault. If it wasn't for her, they wouldn't have been involved in that. And he wouldn't have become like this. His entire life had been ruined by the other party. Where is she? Nan Yuxing gritted his teeth and spat out a few words. It was as if as long as Chu Luiyue appeared in front of him now, he would immediately suck her blood and eat her flesh. Nan Yi cooperated with Elder Jean to treat his injuries while comforting him. "Big Brother, she hasn't come out yet. But since we've all come out, she will definitely come out too. When the time comes, we'll settle this score with her properly." Nan Yuxing held his breath. You were right, he had to live. He had to watch them suffer with his own eyes. With the support of this thought, Nan Yuxing actually managed to endure it. Everyone fell silent and began to wait. Who else would come out next? Elder Yu glanced at Nan Yuxing with a serious expression. He wasn't worried about Nan Yuxing, but, judging from Nan Yuxing's injuries, the situation inside was probably not optimistic. Moreover, 2 people from a Nan family had already come out, but Dumpling and the rest were still nowhere to be seen. He looked at Yi Zhao and realized that Yi Zhao was staring at the black wall with a strange expression. He was about to ask something when he suddenly heard Yi Zhao shout, "Step back. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network." Chapter 17:12. Elder Yi Zhao didn't even think before he tapped the tip of his foot on the ground and flashed backwards. Immediately after, a ripple suddenly rose from the black wall. Whoosh, like a surging river, waves surging. The surrounding heaven and earth energy seemed to be affected by this force and started to surge. The huge totem on the wall suddenly spun faster. A violent and majestic aura surged out from it. Nan Yifan and the rest were the first to bear the brunt. They didn't even have time to set up a barrier before they were enveloped by the terrifying force. Under the impact of this power, the figures of several people instantly flew out uncontrollably. In a hurry, Nan Yifan hurriedly pulled Nan Yuxing. But before he could pull him, he missed. Bang! They fell to the ground one after another. Nan Yuxing's chest shook, and he spat out another mouthful of blood. Yuxing, big brother. Nan Yifan and the rest struggled to get up. Seeing this scene, they were almost scared out of their wits. But at this moment, a few figures rushed out from the black wall. Nan Yifan saw the 2 people in front clearly. Elder Wu Peng, Elder Bai Tong. He had just helped Nan Yuxing up and was about to go over when he suddenly heard a crisp sound. Crack! Something seemed to have broken. Nan Yifan suddenly thought of something, and his eyes widened. He quickly took out a jade token. Of the 4 light spots inside, there were now only 3. Among them, the one that belonged to Elder Bai Tong had broken. Elder Bai Tong was dead. He sucked in a cold breath. The remaining 2 elders hurried over. Elder Wu Peng, how are you? Although Elder Wu Peng was still conscious, his face and body were stained with blood, and his breath was weak. It was obvious that he was seriously injured. Elder Jean, he immediately helped him treat his injuries. The other elder came to Elder Bai Tong's side and realized that he was no longer breathing. He looked at Nan Yifan in panic. Family head, Elder Bai Tong. Nan Yifan closed his eyes and waved his hand. That elder immediately understood what he meant. With a heavy heart, he moved Elder Bai Tong's body to the side, preparing to bring it back for burial. Nan Yifan glanced out of the corner of his eye and saw that a section of Elder Bai Tong's calf had been cut off. He frowned. Elder Bai Tong's leg. What's going on? It doesn't look like a recent injury. Nan Yi hesitated for a moment. She had only mentioned that Elder Bai Tong had been injured during the battle with Shang Wanyu, but she had not mentioned that his leg had been cut off by Rong Xiao. That is, before she could explain, another figure fell out of the black wall. Nan Yi instinctively looked over, and her eyes lit up. Uncle Luo Yin, the man who fell to the ground and stood up with one hand supporting himself, was none other than Luo Yin. Hearing this voice, Luo Yin looked up. When he saw Nan Yi, he heaved a sigh of relief. Then he turned his gaze and saw Nan Yifan and the others. It turned out that they had already arrived. Luo Yin wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and was about to walk towards them when he suddenly felt a chill all over his body. He immediately became alert. His entire body tensed up. At this moment, he realized that there were 2 men standing not far away from Nan Yifan and the others. They were burly and had unfamiliar faces. However, they were extremely strong. When he saw the appearance of the man standing in front of him, Luo Yin suddenly thought of something, and his expression changed slightly. This person was Luo Yin. Nan Yifan walked over and sized him up. After confirming that he had only suffered some minor injuries, he heaved a sigh of relief. At this point, all of their people had come out. Other than Elder Baitong, Elder Wu Peng and Nan Yuxing were both seriously injured. Nan Yi and Luo Yin were in a slightly better condition, but they obviously needed a long time to recuperate. He wondered if there would be any side effects. Nin Yifan had mixed feelings. On one hand, he was glad that these people, except for Elder Baitong, had all come out alive. On the other hand, the battle was tragic and their injuries were serious. Especially Nan Yuxing, who had become a cripple. It was more painful for him than death. At the same time, it also made Nan Yifan's heart ache. Luo Yin nodded. Patriarch, don't worry. I'm fine. He quickly scanned his surroundings and basically determined what the situation was. He had known that it was extremely dangerous inside, so it was normal for such an outcome. Now, his attention was more on the two unfamiliar men. Those two are. Nan Yifan came back to his senses and said, "Oh, I almost forgot to introduce them to you. These two are Patriarch Yi Zhao and Elder Yu of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan." Luo Yin was shocked. He had already guessed that these two might be important figures in the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, but he didn't expect that Yi Zhao, the Patriarch, would also come. Suddenly, he thought of something. Perhaps they came for the contracted Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix in Shangguanyu? Luo Yin suppressed the many thoughts in his heart and bowed politely. Yi Zhao frowned slightly. These people had all come out, but why wasn't there any movement from Dumpling and the rest? Seeing that Yi Zhao didn't pay much attention to him, Luo Yin wasn't angry. The other party was famous for his arrogance, so it was normal for him to have such an attitude. Besides, from the looks of it, he should still be waiting for the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix to come out, right? In fact, everyone present had such doubts in their hearts. Since both sides went in together, why was it that only Nan Yi and the rest came out, but the other party didn't come out at all? This made people think more about it. Nan Yifan thought for a moment and said, "Hey, do you think Shangguanyu and the rest will still come out?" He hated the other party to the bone and couldn't wait to end their lives with his own hands. Nanny paused and sneered. Who knows? Maybe they've already died in there. Chi-Chi. Two figures appeared almost at the same time. Nanny looked over and her heart sank. These two people were actually Nan Suhuai and Chu Ning. What was even more shocking was that other than a few sporadic wounds on their bodies, they were actually fine. From their expressions and state, it was obvious that they weren't injured much. Nan Yifan originally wanted to surround them immediately, but after seeing Nan Suhuai, he was stunned. Why was the dean of Lingxiao College here? At the same time, Nan Suhuai also noticed the strange atmosphere around him and looked over. Nan Yifan? He had actually brought people over? No. The point was that Nan Yi and the rest seemed to have come out before them. Looking around, Nan Suhuai didn't see the person he wanted to see and couldn't help but feel disappointed and worried. Suddenly, his expression changed. Clan leader Yi Zhao, why are you here? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 17:13. Nan Yi suddenly snorted. He actually had the cheek to ask this question. President Nan, don't you know what your precious disciple has done? She must be tired of living to contract a crimson gold heavenly phoenix. Nan Suhuai was stunned. He guessed what Nan Yi was referring to, but wasn't this matter already resolved before? Rong Xiu had clearly sent a letter saying that you had brought Dumpling out of Phoenix God Mountain safely. He had always thought that this matter had been satisfactorily resolved. Could it be that he had guessed wrongly? Yi Zhao said lightly, I'm indeed here to look for Shangguanyu and Dumpling. Nan Suhuai's heart sank. What exactly was going on? If it didn't reach a satisfactory conclusion, Yi Zhao would never let them go and even allowed them to leave with Dumpling. Why did he suddenly? Nan Suhuai took a closer look at him. Yi Zhao's expression was calm and nothing could be seen. For a moment, he was a little nervous. If Yi Zhao was really here to cause trouble for them, then Elder Yu's gaze landed on Chu Ning, and he was a little surprised. Nan Suhuai frowned. Elder Yu's lips curled into a smile before he shifted his gaze away. This man must be the person Shangguanyu was looking for in the god-slaying tomb this time. According to what Nanny said, Shangguan called him Daddy, so they must be father and daughter. He was just a stage 1 warrior, but he had a god realm. If he guessed correctly, he most likely had an indestructible divine body. Shangguan Yu was already surprising enough, but he didn't expect her father to be just as extraordinary. This family was really. Nan Su Huai heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that Elder Yu had no intention of causing trouble for them. He turned to look at Chu Ning, only to find that the latter looked calm, as if she didn't take this matter to heart. Nan Su Huai couldn't help but lean closer and ask in a low voice, Chu Ning, are you really not worried at all? Chu Ning was stunned. Worried? What are you worried about? Nan Su Huai choked and shifted his gaze away. Those two are the clan leader and the 5th elder of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Chu Ning nodded. I know. And then? What was the point of asking then? Nan Su Huai almost couldn't breathe. Did Chu Ning not know how big of a trouble it was for Yer to contract a Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix in private? Dumpling. Chu Ning blinked. Looking at Nan Su Huai's nervous expression, she suddenly understood something. Nan, do you still not know, boom? Before he could finish speaking, the sound of an intense collision of energy suddenly rang out. Everyone turned around and saw 2 figures, one in front and one behind, rushing out from the black wall. However, the person in front of him was illusory and translucent. It was actually just a soul. The person behind him was tall and sturdy. His face was piercingly cold, and his soul conduit realm battle intense surged. It was Shangguan Jing. From the looks of it, the two of them seemed to be fighting. Moreover, it was obvious that Shangguan Jing had the upper hand. That soul's aura was chaotic, and it was obvious that he couldn't hold on much longer. This scene shocked everyone present. Why did another soul suddenly appear? Senior, Nanny's eyes widened, and she couldn't help but blurt out. Nan Yifan immediately looked at her. You know that person? Nanny felt that she had said something wrong. At first, she thought that she was the only one who came out, so she skipped to the part where she met Yu Hongshan, who knew that the two of them were actually still alive, and they were fighting from inside to outside. At this moment, Yu Hongshan, who was in a sorry state, also saw Nanny. Help me. He didn't even think about it before he shouted in a deep voice. Shangguan Jing was indeed powerful. Even though he had been cultivating hard for the past 1,000 years, he was still slightly inferior when it came to fighting. If this continued, he would definitely die in Shangguan Jing's hands today. Nanny gritted her teeth. Father, this senior helped me before. Let's help him now. It would be great if they could get rid of Shangguan Jing at the same time. When Nan Yifan heard this, he nodded without any hesitation. However, he had just taken a step when a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. It was Nan Su Huai. He said with a faint smile, Master Nan, are you going to attack Senior Shangguan Jing? Nan Yifan sneered. Why? Is Nan planning to stop me? Senior Shangguan Jing is Yu Er's ancestor and is also a distinguished guest of our Lingxiao College. If he's in danger, there's no reason for us to sit back and do nothing. Although Nan Su Huai was smiling, his eyes were very determined. Nan Yifan slowly clenched his fists. Nan, are you really going to go against us for Shangguan Jing? Nan Su Huai shrugged with a smile. Didn't your people already do that previously? Don't you think it's ridiculous to ask me this question now? His gaze landed on Nan meaningfully. If it weren't for your daughter provoking us time and time again and finding trouble with us, things wouldn't have developed to this extent. We haven't gone to find trouble with you yet, but you're planning to make a move on us first? Shangguan Jing was Yu Er's Taizu, so they naturally had to protect him. Nan Yifan sneered when he heard this. It's clearly Shangguan Yu's fault, but now Nan wants to falsely accuse her? You want to push all the blame onto my daughter? Nan Su Huai raised his eyebrows. He already knew how Nan explained to these people after she came out. Oh, Nan Su Huai asked with interest. Nanny said that it's all Yu Er's fault. She didn't need to say it. Anyone with a discerning eye can tell what's going on. Chapter 17:14. The voice was cold and calm, but it also carried a powerful pressure that made people dare not defy it. Everyone present could not help but look in the direction of the voice. On the black wall, the power around the huge totem suddenly surged. The void rippled with it. Then, a tall and slender figure walked out from it. The person who came was handsome and elegant. He was dressed in a snow-white robe, and he looked elegant. In an instant, everything in the surroundings seemed to dim in color. All the spiritual aura in the world seemed to converge on this one person. Everyone was silent for a moment. The man raised his eyes slightly, and a pair of eyes that were as deep as the sea quietly looked at the crowd. It was a very light look, but it was so dense that no one dared to look at it directly. When he first appeared, everyone thought he was like an immortal. But when they saw this pair of eyes, they were shocked to realize it was an illusion. Everything that happened before was just an illusion. This was not an immortal who flew down from the 9 mysterious heavens, but a devil who stepped on fire from hell. However, such a feeling was fleeting. Rong Xiu's eyes moved slightly, and that thick layer of bloody, killing intent quietly dissipated. When they looked at him again, that pair of phoenix eyes had returned to their usual gentle, elegant, indifferent, and distant look. Rong Xiu, seeing the person who came, Nan Su Huai and Chu Ning were the first to react, and they both looked happy. Previously, they were still worried that he would not be able to come out safely. Now that they saw that he was safe and sound, and even his clothes were as spotless as usual, they immediately relaxed. He nodded slightly at Nan Su Huai and Chu Ning, indicating that he was fine. Then, he raised his eyes slightly and looked at Shangguan Jing and Yu Hongshan. Since he came out, the two of them had temporarily stopped fighting. Sensing Rong Xiu's cold gaze on him, Yu Hongshan's heart skipped a beat. Danger! Even Shangguan Jing did not cause such a strong sense of danger to him. Yu Hongshan's mind raced. This man called Rong Xiu looked to be in his early 20s, but his strength was unfathomable. Even he couldn't detect it. More importantly, out of so many people, only Rong Xiu came out unscathed. This made Yu Hongshan vigilant. Senior Shangguan, is this the person you mentioned before who betrayed you? Rong Xiu asked calmly. Shangguan Jing came back to his senses and nodded. He vaguely felt that there was something different about Rong Xiu, but he couldn't tell what it was. Rong Xiu nodded. Please do as you wish. He didn't expect this person to still be alive. However, this was also good. Shangguan Jing would be able to deal with him personally to take revenge for what happened back then. Don't worry, no one here will interfere with your matter. You can do whatever you want with him, Rong Xiu said calmly. Shangguan Jing's heart stirred slightly. He finally knew what was wrong. When Rong Xiu said these words, he was using a declarative sentence. His tone was too matter-of-fact, as if he didn't care about the objections of others at all. To put it bluntly, Rong Xiu's words were actually for everyone present to hear. This was an order. Shangguan Jing was secretly shocked. He knew that Rong Xiu had a noble status and had always been high and mighty. But apart from him, the head of the Nan family, Nan Yifan, was also here today. The Nan family status was higher than Yuntian Towers. If he said this, Nan Yifan, Shangguan Jing subconsciously looked at Nan Yifan and was suddenly stunned. Why did Nan Yifan's reaction seem a little off? Nan Yi had also noticed this. After seeing Rong Xiu appear, her emotions were very complicated. Although all the previous twists and turns had already worn away most of her liking for Rong Xiu, it was very difficult for her to completely oppose Rong Xiu. But Rong Xiu obviously didn't take her seriously and even came out to confront her. It would be a lie to say that Nan Yi didn't feel upset. At the same time, she was also angry. Hence, she finally decided to ask her father for help, Nan Yifan. Rong Xiu and the rest were extremely rude to her previously. Now that her father was here, let's see how they could still be arrogant. However, Nan Yifan didn't respond even after Nan Yi shouted twice. Father? Father? She frowned strangely and tugged at Nan Yifan's sleeve. Only then did Nan Yifan come back to his senses and look at her with a stiff expression. What's wrong? Nan Yi frowned even more. What's wrong? Wasn't the situation already right in front of her? Father, are you all right? Nanny asked nervously. He had always been high-spirited, and she rarely saw him with such an expression. Why didn't you mention it before? Nin Yifan didn't finish speaking, but Nanny already understood. Was he talking about Rong Xiao? Nanny was about to defend herself when she suddenly remembered what Rong Xiao had said previously. Wait a minute. From the looks of it, her father and Rong Xiao really knew each other. Patriarch Nan, long time no see. Rong Xiao looked at Nan Yifan and said indifferently. Nan Yifan's expression instantly became subtle. His jaw tightened, and he squeezed out an extremely stiff smile. A long time no see. Successor. As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere in the field instantly became even more strange. Almost everyone looked at Nan Yifan with a strange look in their eyes, especially the people from the Nan family. When they heard Nan Yifan call out the word successor so politely, it was as if they had seen a ghost. He was the patriarch of the Nan family. Whether it was status, experience, or strength, he was much higher than Rong Xiao. Why did it seem like he was the one who was more nervous and perturbed now? Nanny widened her eyes. Father. She knew her father too well. He would never be so polite to someone for no reason. In fact, there was even a hint of reverence and fear. Although Nan Yifan hid his emotions very well, Nan Yi, who was standing beside him, saw everything. Nan Yifan looked at her sternly. This girl actually skipped over such an important matter. If he had known that Rong Xiao was also involved, Nan Yi's heart turned cold from his gaze. No wonder Rong Xiao directly guessed their identity and was so disdainful. They originally thought that he was pretending, but now they were afraid that wasn't the case. But why did her father have to be so polite to a mere successor of Yuntian Tower? Nanny's heart was in turmoil. When she thought of the things that had happened before, she felt terrible. Nan Yifan couldn't be bothered with her as he forced a smile and cupped his hands at Rong Xiao. I didn't expect the successor to be here too. What a coincidence, huh? What a coincidence. Rong Xiao's eyes were cold and his voice was indifferent. The Shangguan Yu that you said you wanted to teach a lesson to is the mistress of Yuntian Tower, I's princess consort. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.